Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 1 of What If Itachi was in Bleach. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. 150 years before Rukia Kuchiki's arrival in Karakura town. The first thing he felt was a gentle breeze on his face and a soothing carpet of cool grass beneath him. He could hear birds chirping nearby, along with the gentle murmur of a running river. The pain that had racked his body before was completely gone, and the young man had to pinch himself to make sure that his senses weren't playing tricks on him. He cautiously opened his eyes and was forced to raise his arm to shield himself from the glare of the morning sun. All of this was a far cry from what he last remembered. Prior to being claimed by darkness, he could vividly recall a decimated and ruined battlefield, even though he had been damn near blind in that final and brutal confrontation. It had not been grass beneath him then, but stone rubble, the blasted remains of the Uchiha clan hideout. There had been no pleasant breeze or clear sky, but a torrential downpour combined with the searing heat from the hellfire that was Amaterasu. Is this truly the great beyond? Thought the young man as his gaze adjusted to the light of the blazing orb in the blue sky. I assumed my final destination would be a sea of fire and vengeful wraiths. The fact that his vision was now perfectly clear would seem to support the fact that he had passed over to the other side. His eyesight had been all but spent by the time his fateful clash with his younger brother had come. There was also a distinct lack of the aches in his chest from the disease that had previously ravaged his body, and he didn't feel like he was about to start coughing up blood anytime soon. Patting himself down, he didn't feel any of the wounds that he had sustained in the fight either, which seemed to support his belief that he had left the mortal coil behind. Looking around, he found himself standing in what looked like a small clearing. Just like his ears had suggested earlier, there was a river nearby. His throat suddenly felt dry, so the young man went over to it and scooped up some water. Studying his reflection on the surface of the river, Itachi Uchiha appeared no worse for the wear. His raven hair, tied back in a low ponytail, was perfectly in order, and there were no blemishes or wounds upon his fair skin. Onyx eyes peered back at him from the surface of the water, and he could perceive them in great detail. The black and red Akatsuki jacket he had worn over the past several years was gone, as was the slashed Hidden Leaf Village shinobi headband, but the gray-blue shirt and pants that had been under the aforementioned coat looked quite clean. His sandals appeared good as new too, and to top it off he still had his chain and circlet necklace as well. "Am I truly dead?" he murmured as he looked around. "This is not quite what I imagined hell would look like." Out of curiosity, his gaze returned to the river as he tried to call upon the unique ocular jutsu that was the hallmark of the Uchiha clan, the Sharingan. However, the eyes of his reflection on the water remained onyx. There were no crimson orbs or black toma orbiting the pupil. He did not feel the surge of power and heightened perception that typically accompanied activating the Sharingan, either. Even with his eyesight as deteriorated as it had become over the years through extensive use of the ocular jutsu's more advanced form, the Mangekyo Sharingan, he had always felt an increase in strength and a sense of precognition each time he had activated the Kekkei Genkei. There was none of that here now, though. His sight was clear, but his Sharingan would not appear. "Looks like you don't take it with you when you die," he mused. "I wonder if it might be better this way." While the Sharingan had been the key to the great power of the Uchiha clan, Itachi had often wondered in life whether or not that strength was a double-edged sword. When used justly, it granted the wielder the power to defend their friends, family, and village. It was an invaluable asset to those who would use it in the name of peace and justice, but far too often its great gifts had led to arrogance. Too many members of the Uchiha clan had become wrapped up in pride in their abilities, and that wasn't even getting into the infamous curse of hatred that came with the ocular jutsu. Itachi had managed to stay rooted in his beliefs and his mission, thus resisting the all-too-often tragic slide into vengeance and fury that those of the Uchiha bloodline found themselves in, but he had never been blind to the possibility that he might go down that dark path. Even if he had resisted the curse of hatred, he knew better than to think that that absolved him of the great crimes that he had committed with the power of the Sharingan. Far too many had died because of him. If there had been any comfort at the end of his life, it was only the knowledge that with his death his younger brother would have the chance to start anew. Sasuke Uchiha could return to the village hidden in the leaves as a hero for killing the man who had murdered nearly the entire Uchiha clan, thus saving their family name from complete disgrace. Itachi could also take solace in the fact that he had purged the curse mark of Orochimaru from Sasuke's body, thus freeing his younger brother from the sick grip that the fallen Sannin had had upon him. As a bonus, Itachi was sure that following the battle Sasuke would awaken his own Mangekyo Sharingan, and that would provide him with a powerful new means to defend himself in the future. Even with that in mind, though, could Itachi truly rest easy? He was all too aware of the hatred that had built up in Sasuke over the years, and Itachi had done his little brother no favors in that regard. Now that Itachi had fallen, would Sasuke's thirst for vengeance truly be satisfied, or would it seek out a new target? There was the very real chance that the curse of hatred could consume Sasuke, and that would make everything Itachi had done up until that fateful duel at the Uchiha clan hideout utterly meaningless. If Sasuke succumbed to the curse, would there be any hope of saving him? An image of a blonde boy flashed through Itachi's mind. He was Sasuke's age, and so full of fire, determination, and hope. And he was where Itachi would place his hope. Naruto Uzumaki. A very small smile appeared on Itachi's face. It had been so long since he had shown anyone the slightest measure of trust, but his gut feeling was that his faith in the keeper of the Nine-Tails Fox would not be misplaced. Should the worst come to pass, I shall leave Sasuke's fate in your hands, Naruto. Dusting himself off, Itachi took another look around, studying his new environment. Apart from the clearing and the river, he was surrounded mostly by trees, but there appeared to be the outskirts of some kind of settlement not too far downstream. Well, I suppose there's nowhere better for me to start. It's time to get moving. The life that Itachi Uchiha, notorious rogue ninja and Akatsuki member but in actuality a loyal shinobi of the village hidden in the leaves, had been born into had come to an end. It was time for him to begin his afterlife. 2 weeks later. Thank you, said Itachi as he accepted a handful of coins from the elderly shopkeeper. The old man smiled. You're quite welcome. I haven't had an errand runner as efficient as you in a long time. It's nice to have some quality help around here, and you certainly earn your keep. When he'd first stumbled into the settlement he had noticed 2 weeks ago, Itachi had been stunned to realize that what he had seen was just the edge of a truly gargantuan city the likes of which he had never seen before. The clearing that he had woken up in was actually just one of the small stretches of wilderness that were allowed to grow between districts of what was otherwise a monumental urban sprawl. He had wandered through the city aimlessly for 2 days as he'd struggled to get his bearings, having to assemble bits and pieces of knowledge from overheard gossip and a few questions to passers-by. He would truly have been lost forever were it not for a lucky break. On his second night in the city, as he'd been searching for somewhere to sleep for the night, he'd wound up outside a general store. There had been a commotion coming from inside it, and upon investigation Itachi had discovered a handful of thugs attempting to rob the place after roughing up the proprietor. Recognizing a golden opportunity to make an impression and gain a potential source of information regarding this strange afterlife, Itachi had attacked the would-be robbers and brought them down in a matter of seconds. In doing so he had learned several valuable lessons. His skills in taijutsu remained as sharp as ever, he was still quite capable of sneaking up on a target, and he was no longer capable of calling upon the genjutsu and ninjutsu powers that he had employed while he was alive. That didn't mean he was completely powerless, though. He could sense some form of new energy within him, similar to chakra but at the same time distinctly different, but he lacked the knowledge necessary to fully understand it. After Itachi had sent the punks packing and seen to the proprietor's bumps and bruises, the old man had offered him a place to stay for the night. Itachi had gratefully accepted the offer, and it was a most fortuitous one as well. He had felt himself growing hungry as he had wandered the city, which had struck him as very strange since this was supposed to be the afterlife and it did not make sense for him to still require food. The proprietor had fed him while at the same time offering Itachi some valuable information regarding his new condition. The first order of business had been to find out just where he had wound up, and the proprietor had happily provided that information. He was in the Rukan district, sometimes referred to as the Wandering Soul City. To narrow things down, Itachi learned that he was currently in Western Rukan, District 37. The Rukan district was divided into 4 main districts, North, South, East, and West, and each of those 4 districts were then broken down into 80 smaller divisions, making for 320 in total. Itachi had gotten lucky. According to the proprietor, standards of living declined the higher the district's number was, with the descent into poverty especially noticeable beyond District 50. The former shinobi also learned that he was actually in the minority as far as his need for food was concerned. It was true that all souls in what the proprietor told him was the known as the Soul Society could partake in meals and indeed enjoyed them, but it was only those with active spirit energy that could truly experience hunger. The revelation that Itachi had that spirit energy had been quickly followed by an alarming incident. The old man had suddenly keeled over halfway through his explanation. Itachi had moved forward to help, but the proprietor had held out a hand to keep him back. The cause of the old man's collapse had been the pressure exerted by the spirit energy leaking out of Itachi, and moving closer would only make things worse. After a moment, the proprietor had managed to right himself, and while he tried to make light of the incident, Itachi still felt terrible about it and had made to leave. The old man had stopped him though, claiming that he would only need a little bit of time to adjust to what he called Itachi's spiritual pressure, although Itachi could detect a hint of doubt in the proprietor's voice. Still, the old man had insisted on letting Itachi remain at least for the night as a means of repaying him for throwing out the punks, so Itachi had politely accepted the offer with the full intention of leaving as soon as dawn broke. As it turned out, though, the old man had risen before Itachi, and had asked him to move some goods to a customer since his usual daily labor was running late. Not having anything better to do and realizing that this would be a good chance to learn how to properly navigate the Rukan district, Itachi performed the errand as requested. He had not been expecting payment, which had made it all the more surprising when the old man had given him a handful of coins upon his return. Not only that, but the old man had offered him a job right there on the spot. Apparently Itachi's delivery time had beaten those of the regular helpers by a considerable margin, even though Itachi had literally just arrived in the Soul Society and was still trying to get his bearings. Figuring that it would be good to have at least a temporary source of income while he tried to acclimate to his new environment, Itachi accepted the job. He continued to live at the old man's shop while running errands for him, but he did his best to keep some measure of distance between him and his new employer in order to avoid causing the proprietor to collapse again. Unfortunately, that was easier said than done. The radius affected by Itachi's spiritual pressure seemed to fluctuate randomly, and it got even worse when he tried to sleep. Of course, the violent nightmares he had whenever he attempted to get some shut-eye probably weren't helping matters. Over the course of his errands for the shopkeeper, it was inevitable that his gaze would soon fall upon what appeared to be a fortified region that seemed to be at the very heart of this vast city. Upon inquiry, the proprietor had told him what it was, the Seraite, or the Court of Pure Souls. It was the heart of the Soul Society, the capital city of the afterlife, home to both its rulers and its guardians, the Soul Reapers. The shopkeeper had never been inside personally, but he had a few acquaintances who were allowed entry, and from the tales they had relayed to him, Itachi gained a glimpse at what he realized was a startling gap in security and comfort between the Seraite and the Rukan district. Clearly the afterlife was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and while Itachi had further questions, it soon became apparent that the proprietor would not be able to give him satisfactory answers. Itachi resolved to learn more at a later date, but for now he would focus on his current duties as an errand runner while settling into his life in the great beyond. "Something on your mind, lad?" asked the shopkeeper. Itachi shook his head. "It's nothing important. Are there any more packages that require delivery today?" "Just one," the proprietor replied as he pointed to a sack of rice. "Do you mind hauling that over to the bar down by the river? I know it's close to sundown, but I promised the establishment's owner that we'd have this load delivered before the day was out." "I'll handle it," said Itachi as he grabbed the bag and effortlessly hefted it over his shoulder. The old man smiled. "Thank you, Itachi. I know I've said this before, but you're a good sort. I bet your parents were mighty proud of you back when you were still alive." Itachi averted his gaze. Family was not a matter he liked to discuss, and if the proprietor knew just what he had done in his past life he would understand that quite well. "I'd best get moving. I'll likely be back late, so don't wait up for me. I can grab something to eat on the way back, so don't worry about me when you make dinner." The shopkeeper nodded. "All right, then, take care of yourself, Itachi. West Rukan District 37 is a fair place, but as you know it can still get a little rough after dark. Don't do anything foolish." Itachi nodded as he set out. "I'll be careful." His journey to the bar was for the most part uneventful. Itachi always made an effort to put some distance between himself and other people just in case his spirit energy started flaring up again. He wished that there was a way for him to properly control it, but since he was still trying to work out the differences between it and chakra, he still had a long way to go before he could prevent his spiritual pressure from posing a hazard to the people around him. The old man mentioned before that soul reapers learn to control their spiritual pressure. He mused, "I wonder what sort of exercises are required in order to achieve that." He was getting close to his objective when the instincts that had been finely honed over years of experience as a shinobi told him that he was being followed. Surreptitiously looking around as he continued his journey, he caught a glimpse of a cloaked figure before they disappeared behind a building. About a block later he managed to catch another glimpse of the same figure, and a little further down the road he had his third spotting. That was far too many times to be mere coincidence. He was definitely being tailed. What's more, the third time he actually felt a faint pulse of spiritual pressure come from his pursuer. Was it one of the punks from 2 weeks ago out for payback? That was the first possibility that came to mind, but after a moment Itachi discarded it. None of the thugs from the robbery attempt at the shop had exerted any kind of spiritual pressure that Itachi could perceive during their brief skirmish. A couple blocks later he felt another pulse from his pursuer. It didn't feel like a deliberate probe, and Itachi guessed that whoever was following him did not have complete control over their spiritual pressure. So we're on even ground as far as that's concerned, he thought. I should still be cautious. He completed his delivery a few minutes later, but rather than head back to the shop for the night he went behind the bar towards the river. Itachi had no intention of involving the proprietor with his pursuer. He would deal with whoever was following him on his own. Putting his back to the river, his eyes narrowed as he braced himself for a confrontation. I know you're there. What business do you have with me? The cloaked figure stepped out of the shadows, and Itachi heard a shockingly familiar voice reply with a chuckle. Well, that depends. It cannot be, thought Itachi, stunned as the figure lowered their cloak. The odds of us meeting in an environment as vast as the Rukan district are less than 1,000,000,000 to 1. Probability could be damned here, though. Itachi knew that there was no mistaking who he was faced with. The tall and toned figure, waist-length spiky white hair tied in a ponytail, fair skin and red lines descending from his dark eyes were unmistakable. He was lacking the red haori from their last encounter, but he still wore the same green short shirt kimono and matching pants from before, along with a pair of wooden sandals. There was a humorous light in his eyes, but Itachi knew that it could become quite menacing should the occasion call for it, and given the circumstances under which they had last met it would not surprise him if that happened here. Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin of the village hidden in the leaves, gave him a piercing glare. On whether or not you harmed my apprentice before you died, Itachi Uchiha. Itachi's mind was racing as he rapidly assessed the situation. Since Jiraiya was here, that obviously meant that he had died, and the list of people capable of taking down one of the legendary Sannin was very small. Itachi had a few guesses as to who might have ultimately done the deed, but learning that was a secondary concern at this point. He knew that Jiraiya had perceived him to be an enemy when they were both alive, and not without reason. Itachi had been a member of the Akatsuki, a group that had sought to collect all of the tailed beasts, meaning that they had posed a direct threat to Naruto Uzumaki, Jiraiya's last disciple. To make matters worse, the last time they had met in person, Itachi had been infiltrating the village hidden in the leaves with his partner in the Akatsuki, Kisame Hoshigaki, with the purpose of their mission ostensibly being to capture Naruto. That had indeed been Kisame's intention, but not Itachi's. His had only been to serve as a warning to Danzo Shimura and the elders that governed the village hidden in the leaves that he was still alive and would turn against them should they threaten Sasuke. Unfortunately, Jiraiya had not been privy to that knowledge or the fact that he was actually a double agent for the Hidden Leaf Village. As far as the Sannin was concerned, Itachi was nothing more than a murderer. He would have to play his cards with great care if he wanted to avoid a violent confrontation. You may understandably find this hard to believe, said Itachi, but it was never my intention to bring any harm whatsoever to your student, Lord Jiraiya. Jiraiya smirked. Do you really think that throwing a fancy title in front of my name will make me any more inclined to trust your word? I know damn well that the Akatsuki were hunting the tailed beasts and extracting them from their hosts, killing those hosts in the process, and so do you. I do not deny it, Itachi replied calmly, but I never once desired that fate for Naruto. Jiraiya folded his arms. Really, you had a funny way of showing it, sneaking into the Leaf Village with your partner like that and picking a fight with the Jonin. You really worked over Kakashi in that little skirmish, you know. Itachi's eyes narrowed. If you recall that engagement, then you may also remember that all of the Leaf Shinobi that came to the scene survived the encounter, including Kakashi. I was fully capable of killing him and his comrades, and I imagine that you were well aware of that at the time. Did you ever wonder why I let them live? The Sannin had an incredible degree of control and discipline, but even so he could not hide from Itachi the oh-so-subtle shift in his brow. He was genuinely considering what Itachi had just told him. Now that you mention it, I did find that strange. But you could have done that just to throw us off guard. You always were a crafty one, after all. Do not confuse me with Orochimaru, said Itachi. I do not engage in psychological warfare for my own amusement, for starters. Maybe, Jiraiya replied, but you murdered your own parents simply to test your power. Not even Orochimaru went that far. Itachi shook his head. It is true that I killed them along with the rest of the Uchiha clan, but it was not to test my power. The last thing I wanted was to harm any of them. If there had been another path to what I truly wanted, then I would have taken it. Jiraiya seemed a bit taken aback by this. Itachi could feel the veteran shinobi studying him intently. He did his best to keep his breathing calm. If it did come down to a fight, he did not know if he could win. His Sharingan was gone, as were the repertoire of ninjutsu and genjutsu that he had built up over the years. He had no way of knowing if Jiraiya had been similarly depowered, and even if that were the case, that did not change the fact that the Sannin was known to be a strong physical combatant. Itachi believed that he might have a slight edge in speed over the sage, but he knew that Jiraiya was both powerful and cunning. A fight would be an absolute last resort, and if it came down to it, Itachi would do everything in his power to withdraw before things went too far. I don't know if souls can die, he mused darkly, and I'd rather avoid finding out firsthand if possible. His thoughts were interrupted by a spine-chilling roar the likes of which he had never heard before. He saw Jiraiya's eyes widen slightly, but unlike Itachi there seemed to be a sense of comprehension in his gaze. "No," said the Sannin softly, "not here." There was a rustling coming from the tree line across the river, and a few moments later a black ape-like creature the size of a single-story house burst out into the open. Itachi's eyes were drawn to two distinctive features, a gaping circular hole in the monstrosity's chest and white death mask where a face should have been. "What is that thing?" asked Itachi as he shifted into a fighting stance. "That," said Jiraiya grimly, "is a hollow." Itachi's eyes widened slightly at the word. The proprietor had mentioned that one of the duties of soul reapers was to fight unholy creatures called hollows, but the old man had never described what one actually looked like. He also recalled the shopkeeper claiming that hollows devoured souls, and a sickening feeling in Itachi's gut told him that his earlier musings regarding the possibility of souls dying actually had a chance of being tested tonight. "Have you seen this thing before?" asked Itachi. "Not this exact one," said Jiraiya, "but one similar to it attacked me when I first arrived here. It was all I could do to escape, although if I could still use ninjutsu it'd be another matter." The hollow appeared to be studying Itachi and Jiraiya at the moment, but the young man had a feeling that would change soon enough. Jiraiya's statement also confirmed to Itachi that the Sannin had been depowered in a manner similar to him. His gaze narrowed as he realized that there was only one way out of this mess. "Lord Jiraiya," he said quickly, "if what you say is true, then our only chance for survival here is by working together." Jiraiya's eyes widened a bit as he grasped the full weight behind Itachi's statement. "Wait a minute, you mean that you—" Itachi nodded. "My Sharingan is gone, as is my ability to utilize ninjutsu and genjutsu. Taijutsu is the only weapon remaining in my arsenal, and it would seem that the same is true for you. Cooperation is our only viable option, especially if we are to prevent this hollow from attacking the residents of this area." "Why would you care about the people who live here?" asked Jiraiya. "If we make it through this, you may yet get the chance to find out," Itachi replied hastily. "What will it be, Lord Jiraiya?" He was surprised to see the sage smirk. "All right, I'll play along. Let's see what you've got without your Sharingan, Itachi." Itachi nodded. The time for talk was over. The beast across the river looked ready to pounce. Deciding that offense would be the key to survival, Itachi made the first move. Surging forward, he darted across a series of rocks jutting out from the water and made it to the other side of the river in a matter of seconds. He didn't even need to look over his shoulder to know that Jiraiya was right behind him. "This thing must have a weak point," he said. "Let's find it." Jiraiya nodded. "Break right, I'll take the left." Itachi did as Jiraiya said, and the hollow moved right for him. The beast took a swing with one of its tree-trunk-thick arms, but the strike was sloppy and Itachi was able to evade it. He seized the opportunity by leaping up onto the hollow's arm and running across it. Reaching the creature's shoulder in a matter of moments, Itachi proceeded to punch the hollow right in the neck. The hollow roared, and for a moment Itachi thought he might have hit a vein or some other vulnerable spot. However, the beast moved its arm to swat him from its shoulder a second later. It seemed more annoyed with him than anything else. Itachi flipped and managed to land on his feet, and as he did so Jiraiya charged in, slamming his fist into the hollow's gut. The creature bellowed and doubled over. It appeared that Jiraiya had actually done some damage to the beast. Unfortunately, it was not nearly enough to bring the hollow down for good. It lurched forward, its jaws snapping as it tried to rip Jiraiya in half with its teeth. The sage backflipped to get out of the way, and Itachi used the hollow's distraction to move in again. This time his target was where he guessed the creature's collarbone would be, and he brought his foot down in a hard kick. Once again, the hollow screamed, but the creature's hide was tough, and Itachi could tell that he hadn't come close to doing serious damage. However, Itachi's efforts were not in vain. Using the former Akatsuki's move as a distraction, Jiraiya charged in again. Swinging his fist in a vicious right hook, he caught the hollow right on the jaw. There was an audible crack, and Itachi saw a small set of fissures appear on the lower left portion of the beast's mask. Jiraiya chuckled. "Well, That's a start. Itachi nodded as he rushed in again. Indeed, let's build on it. He hit the creature in the exact same spot that Jiraiya had. The tiny web of cracks began to grow, but Itachi's fist stung from the impact. The hollow's mask was harder than its hide. He was impressed that Jiraiya's punch had done as much damage as it had. Take a nap, shouted the sage as he nailed the beast on the chin with a brutal uppercut. The hollow staggered backwards, and Itachi seized the opening to move in again. This time he aimed for the eye holes of the beast's mask, but before he could strike, the creature suddenly started flailing around wildly with its arms. Itachi was caught in midair, and the heavy blow nailed him right in the torso. He was sent flying by the impact and wound up slamming right into the side of the bar that he'd made his earlier delivery to. It was all he could do to keep from losing consciousness right there on the spot. Struggling to regain his footing and massaging his chest, Itachi counted at least one cracked rib. This thing has no combat training to speak of, he thought, but it makes up for that with raw power fueled by primal fury. Chakra no longer flows through Jiraiya or myself, neither of us have a firm grasp on this new spirit energy that's taken its place. This is clearly an uphill fight for us. Itachi wasn't the only one who was injured. Jiraiya had taken a solid hit as well. The cracks on the monster's mask had grown even more, indicating a successful strike by the sage, but he had paid for it with what looked like a dislocated left shoulder. The hollow was screaming in fury, currently consumed with pain, but Itachi doubted that would last for long. If there was any time that a withdrawal was possible, it was now. It was tempting, but it was ultimately not an option that Itachi would take. If he withdrew, it would only give the hollow a chance to start hunting the souls of the Rukan district. It was true that Itachi didn't know any of them apart from the shopkeeper, but the fact remained that they were innocent people who had already died once, and Itachi would do everything in his power to prevent them from dying again tonight. Much to his surprise, he saw Jiraiya smirking at him. "I'll be damned." "What?" said Itachi, his eyes narrowing as he studied the Sannin. "I thought for sure that you'd take this chance to retreat," Jiraiya replied. "No Sharingan, no ninjutsu, no genjutsu, and you don't have a single weapon on you. And yet I can tell just from the look in your eyes that you're not going to run." Itachi nodded firmly. "That's right. If you wish to withdraw, I shall not stop you. I will hold this beast back for as long as I can. In that time, you may be able to find reinforcements." Jiraiya laughed. "Maybe, but I doubt I could find them before this thing tore you apart. I have no intention of letting that happen." Itachi's eyes widened slightly. "What? Why?" "Don't get me wrong," said Jiraiya, "I've still got some bones to pick with you. However, the way you've been fighting tonight, well, if we both make it through this alive, I might just be willing to hear you out." "You may regret that decision," said Itachi with a nod at the hollow. "We've hurt it, but not as bad as it's hurt us." Jiraiya chuckled. "Oh, I know that. Our backs are to the wall, no doubt there, but that's the time to fight harder than ever. If this thing wants to feast on souls tonight, it's gonna have to take mine first, and I'll be damned if I don't make it work for it." Despite their situation, Itachi could not help but smirk ever so slightly. "Like master, like student. I didn't know Naruto that well, but from what I do know it would seem that his teacher is as stubborn as he is." Jiraiya grinned. "You got that right, so, what do you say? Shall we put this thing in the ground?" Itachi nodded as he saw the hollow begin to regain its composure. "Can you shatter that mask?" "Yeah," said Jiraiya, "I just need one more good hit. I'll give it everything I've got." "In that case," said Itachi, "I'll make the first move. Once his attention is on me, make your attack. Watch yourself," Jiraiya cautioned. "Another hit from that thing and you'll have more than just a cracked rib or two." "I'm well aware of that," said Itachi. "Here goes nothing." He raced forward, picking up a rock as he did so. As soon as the hollow's gaze was on him, he threw it as hard as he could. His missile found its mark, going right into the eye hole in the hollow's mask. The beast screeched in agony but was still locked onto Itachi. The former shinobi used that to his advantage, stopping long enough to crook his finger and motion for the monster to come and get him. In its fury, the hollow was all too vulnerable to the taunt, and it came charging headlong at Itachi. He rolled to the side at the last moment and leapt up onto the creature's back before punching with all his might at the hollow's neck. Once again, the hollow screamed in pain before grabbing Itachi and throwing him. This time he hit the river and skipped over the surface like a rock before coming to a halt on the opposite shore. Even as he climbed to his feet he saw the beast charging him, and this time Itachi knew he would not be able to dodge. That was where Jiraiya came in. Just as the hollow was about to sink its teeth into Itachi, the wandering sage nailed the monster with an insanely powerful right hook in the exact spot he and Itachi had hit it before on its mask. This was no ordinary punch. Itachi could actually perceive what looked like an aura of white spirit energy surrounding Jiraiya's fist. It didn't appear to be deliberate, the Sannin seemed to have summoned it from pure instinct. The blow was devastating. The hollow's mask completely shattered, and for just a moment Itachi was shocked to see what looked like a human face behind it. It was only for a moment, though. A second later the creature dissolved completely. Itachi fell to one knee, grasping his chest as he tried to catch his breath. "How did you do that?" Jiraiya started laughing as he clutched his left shoulder. "Not a damn clue, but it felt good. I'll have to see if I can pull that trick off later," he mused. "I can't believe he was able to do that, but I'm not complaining. We actually managed to win, and that's enough for now." Or at least it was until a series of roars nearly identical to the one that had heralded their late foe's initial appearance ripped through the night. Itachi's face paled as his eyes turned to the tree line. "No." Jiraiya shook his head. "You have got to be kidding me." The two of them looked on as not one, not two, but three more hollows emerged from the trees. They were all as big as the one they had just killed, and of the same general body type as well. Itachi struggled to his feet and prepared himself for another round, but he would not kid himself. With how hard it had been for the two of them to kill just one of those monsters, they didn't stand a ghost of a chance against three. And that was when a feminine voice sweeter than the finest rice wine rang out from behind the two of them. "Looks like you could use little break, boys. Mind if we tag in?" Turning around, Itachi saw what could only be described as a goddess and an angel standing before him. The former was a slender and well-endowed woman with rich brown skin, radiant golden eyes, and neck-length purple-black hair. She was clothed in a single black sleeveless and backless uniform, with matching wrist guards and a ribbon tied around her neck. A wakizashi with a black hilt and golden circular guard was sheathed horizontally behind her lower back, and her right hand was hovering over the handle. There was an almost playful light in her gaze, and the way she was looking at the hollows somehow reminded Itachi of how a cat might peer at its prey just before it pounced. As for the angel, she appeared very much as an elegant lady of compassion and grace. Her long and lustrous raven hair looped around her neck and was tied in braid that ran down the front of her body. Her eyes were a gentle shade of blue, but there was glint within them that told Itachi this woman was not to be trifled with. The black robe and white haori she wore fit loosely but still did not completely conceal her curvy and athletic figure. A full-length nodashi with an oval tsuba and red handle was tied to a string that looped over her shoulder, and like her companion her hand was held just above the handle. The angel gave Itachi and Jiraiya a warm smile. "You needn't worry. These hollows will be dispatched momentarily, I assure you. Please, rest for a bit. I shall examine your wounds shortly." You know, Hannah," said the goddess, "I can take all three of these guys, you don't have to get involved." The angel shook her head. "I'm well aware of that, but I need to swing my blade every once in a while. It wouldn't do for a captain to grow rusty with her swordsmanship, would you not agree, Yoruichi?" Yoruichi smirked. "True. All right, how about this? I'll take the one on the right and the one in the middle, and you take the one on the left. Deal?" Hannah nodded. "Very well, then." The two women stepped forward as the trio of hollows crossed the river and headed straight towards them. Despite the danger, the pair of ladies were completely calm. No, it was more than that. They looked utterly casual about the danger that they were walking into. They were completely confident in their abilities, and Itachi was curious to see just what they were capable of. The trio of hollows roared at the duo as they charged. As Itachi and Jiraiya looked on, Yoruichi seemed to flicker for just a split second before vanishing from sight altogether. She reappeared a moment later with her wakizashi drawn and thrust up through the chin of one of the hollows. The creature had only just begun to dissolve when Yoruichi had disappeared again. A split second later she was behind the second hollow, and in less than a blink of an eye she had thrust her blade through the back of the hollow's head. Incredible, thought Itachi as the second hollow disintegrated. It took everything Jiraiya and I had to take down one of those things, but she just killed two of them in a matter of seconds. The third hollow was rushing headlong at Hannah, who drew her sword in a single fluid and elegant motion. The smile on her face was that of a teacher about to knock a troublesome student down a peg or two, and as the hollow lurched forward with a haymaker the raven-haired angel effortlessly took its arm off with a single swing. As the beast howled in pain, Hannah almost casually removed its other arm before administering the coup de grace with a clean swing right through the monster's neck. To his right he heard Jiraiya whistle as the last hollow dissolved. "Pinch me, I swear I'm dreaming." It was a sentiment that Itachi shared. He had seen his share of powerful shinobi in the past, but these two women were in a league of their own. Blinding speed, graceful fluidity, lethal precision. Itachi had never seen anything like it. Yoruichi sighed as she sheathed her wakizashi. Ah, man, that's it. That doesn't even qualify as an after-meal warm-up. Guess I'll have to work off those rice balls the old-fashioned way. Something tells me that you'll have little difficult with that, said Unohana. Now, I believe I have a pair of patients to examine here. Jiraiya grinned as Unohana approached. Oh, yes, please. Examine to your heart's content, my lovely. Without the slightest bit of warning, the raven-haired woman popped Jiraiya's dislocated shoulder right back into place. The legendary Sannin let out a rather undignified yelp at the sudden and no doubt quite painful field first aid. Ow, 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 he hissed as he rubbed his shoulder. Hey, couldn't I have gotten a little warning first? Work on your manners, said Unohana as she turned her attention to Itachi, and next time you may just get that luxury. Yoruichi smirked. Face it, pal, you walked right into that one. By contrast, her treatment of Itachi was much gentler, although he supposed that was in no small part due to the fact that he wasn't blatantly trying to hit on her. Please, sit down and remove your shirt, young man. I promise that this will not hurt a bit. Itachi did as he was told, and a moment later the woman knelt before him and placed one hand on his chest and the other on his shoulder. She gave him a warm smile, while over her shoulder he saw Yoruichi studying him closely. Try to relax your breathing, said Unohana, this will not take long. Itachi nodded, and a moment later he felt a sudden warmth flowing through his chest. Looking down, he saw that the hand on his chest was bathed in blue-green energy. It reminded him of medical ninjutsu that he had seen in the past, but it had its own distinct feel to it. That's it, said his healer, her voice as soothing as the whisper of a flowing stream. Calm breaths, young man. Peace will encourage your recovery. You fought bravely, and I would not have you suffer for your courage. She's got that right, said Yoruichi with a smile. You've got some serious guts. Your moves weren't half bad, either. How long were you watching us? Asked Itachi. Since just after the two of you started fighting the Hollow, Yoruichi replied. That's odd, said Jiraiya, still massaging his shoulder. I never sensed so much as a hint of either of you. Usually I'm pretty good at picking up when someone's got their eyes on me, especially when it's a pair of lovely ladies. Itachi nodded. I, too, am normally able to detect when I am under surveillance. How is it that you were able to conceal yourselves so completely? We've both trained to suppress our spiritual pressure, said Yoruichi. Every soul reaper learns to control the energy they outwardly exert, but with practice one can go further than that. It's not 100% concealment, but it's still quite useful. If we did not suppress our spiritual pressure, said Unohana, we would cause great harm to the people around us. We would also be walking beacons for hollows. Yoruichi smirked. You say that second bit like it's a bad thing. If a few more came our way tonight I might be able to burn off those rice balls. Unohana gave a warm laugh. Come now, Yoruichi, we both know you better than that. You hardly need a fight for exercise. Yoruichi nodded. That's true. Actually, to be honest I'm a little worried. It's been a while since Hollows managed to get all the way to West Rukan 37. Unohana sighed. My thoughts exactly. The head captain will want to hear of this. Like we don't have enough on our plate as it is, said Yoruichi as she rolled her eyes. I'm the captain that's supposed to proctor the entrance exams tomorrow, and you're on call for the student physicals. It's my duty as captain of Squad 4, after all, said Unohana with a smile. I don't mind handling the report for this incident as well, though. Yoruichi grinned. Are you serious? You're the best, Unohana. Just don't make a habit of asking it of me, Unohana replied. A captain that shirks her paperwork on a regular basis needs to reevaluate her position. Unohana continued to smile, but there was a sudden darkness behind her serene gaze that Itachi found to be highly unnerving. You would do well to think carefully should you wish to pass off your reports to me in the future, Yoruichi. Is that clear? Yoruichi sharply nodded, and Itachi could not help but notice her stance had stiffened ever so slightly. Yes, Captain Unohana. Several light bulbs began to go off in Itachi's head as he recalled his conversations with the shopkeeper. So, you're both captains in the 13 court guard squads. Jiraiya whistled. Impressive. Oh, yeah, that's right, we haven't properly introduced ourselves yet. Sorry about that, said Yoruichi as she gave Itachi a friendly smile. The name's Yoruichi Shihoin. I'm the captain of Squad 2. The woman healing Itachi nodded. And I am Retsu Unohana, captain of Squad 4. My name is Itachi Uchiha, he replied. Yoruichi knelt next to him and held out her hand. Nice to meet you, Itachi. Itachi nodded as he accepted her hand. Likewise. The same here, as well, said Unohana. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Itachi. So, said Yoruichi as she turned to Jiraiya, what do we call you? Jiraiya grinned. Oh, you lovely ladies can call me whatever you want. So buffoon would suffice, then? Asked Unohana with a giggle. I was gonna say hedgehog, said Yoruichi with a smirk. Seriously, look at that hair. The sage chuckled. Well, I suppose I was asking for that one. My name is Jiraiya. I'd like to sincerely thank the two of you for helping us out here. Yes, said Itachi, we owe you both our lives. Or I suppose that would be, after lives, now. Ah, said Yoruichi, comprehension dawning, you guys are new arrivals, aren't you? That's correct, Jiraiya replied. I'm not sure when Itachi got here, but my arrival was just a few weeks ago. Itachi nodded. Mine was precisely 2 weeks to this day. I see, said Unohana, you are most fortunate that we found you when we did. With the way your spirit energy was fluctuating earlier, I imagine hollows would find you to be most appetizing morsels. She's right, said Yoruichi, her expression quite serious. In fact, I bet those hollows were hunting you specifically. Your spirit energy drew them in like moths to the flame, and you can be damn sure this won't be the last time it happens. Damn, said Jiraiya with a grimace, I was afraid that would be the case. Itachi sighed. It's not just that. When I'm near people, sometimes they collapse, and I've learned recently that it's because of my spiritual pressure. I've done my best to keep a safe distance from others to minimize harm, but still. Jiraiya nodded. I think I know what you mean. I've had similar experiences since I've arrived here. So far things haven't been that bad, but I think it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt. Itachi saw Yoruichi turn to Unohana. The two women stared at each other for a moment, and it seemed as if there was an unspoken exchange happening between them. A few seconds later they both nodded and turned to Itachi and Jiraiya. What if I told you that we could give you both the chance to control your spirit energy? Asked Yoruichi with a smile. Itachi's eyes narrowed. What would this involve? As I'm sure you heard her mention earlier, said Unohana, Yoruichi is in charge of proctoring a series of examinations tomorrow. To be more precise, she will be overseeing the annual entrance examinations for Shino Academy, the institution charged with instructing future generations of Soul Reapers. Yoruichi grinned. I'll put it to you straight, I want you two to enroll. You guys might not know how to properly control your spirit energy, but you still managed to take down a hollow using nothing but teamwork, your bare hands, and some serious balls. You've got some major potential, and it'd be a shame to let it go to waste. Unohana smiled. She is quite correct. It's not every day that we see talent such as yours. If you enroll in Shino Academy, that talent will be nurtured, and upon graduation you will be able to put it to good use. It's no walk in the park, Yoruichi added. The standard curriculum lasts 6 years, and advanced tracks can pack more into that same time period if you've got the aptitude for it. You'll be put through your paces, but if what you were capable of doing tonight is any indication, I think you guys will put your fellow students to shame. What do you say? Would we even be able to take the entrance exams? Asked Itachi. As you guessed, we are new arrivals here. Our knowledge of the Soul Society and all its aspects is sorely lacking. Not to mention you said that the exams are tomorrow, said Jiraiya. I'm all for a good cram session if it comes down to it, but the time frame here might be pushing it. Yoruichi shook her head. The entrance exams are not your traditional academic tests. There is a written portion, but the ability to pass it is not determined by whether or not you studied beforehand. Someone can walk right in from the Rukin district with no prior education and still make it through. In fact, more than a few have done precisely that. That is not to say that the examinations are easy, said Unohana. You will be pushed, but if you follow your proctor's instructions you will have a fair opportunity to pass on your own merits. Itachi looked at Jiraiya. The legendary Sannin was studying him carefully, and Itachi was all too aware that just because they had vanquished a hollow together did not mean that he had completely earned the sage's trust. He had no doubt that Jiraiya would be watching him like a hawk if he enrolled in Shino Academy, but he was willing to endure that extra layer of scrutiny if it meant learning to control his powers. Finding out how to suppress and regulate his spiritual pressure was not the only reason he wanted to enroll, though. He turned towards Yoruichi and found that she was studying him just as intently as Jiraiya was. She intrigued Itachi in a way that he had not felt about a woman in a long, long time. Putting aside the fact that she and Unohana had saved his life, the abilities that she had demonstrated in that utterly one-sided slaughter of the Hollows had been nothing short of astounding, and Itachi was sure that what he had witnessed was but a tiny fraction of what she was truly capable of. After a long moment Itachi nodded, his gaze still fixed on Yoruichi. Very well, then, I will not presume to speak for Jiraiya, but I shall enroll in your institution. Yoruichi was practically beaming at his response. I knew you'd come around. Man, I can't wait to rub it into Jashiro's face that I scouted the top student this year. Hey, now, said Jiraiya with a smirk, he's gonna have some competition for that spot, I'm in. Splendid, said Unohana with a smile, I'm looking forward to seeing your results. As Yoruichi mentioned before, I will be in charge of the student physicals as well, so you can expect to see me once the primary examinations are complete. Oh, really, said Jiraiya with a grin, that'll be a physical to look forward to, I'm sure. Yoruichi chuckled, you really might want to rethink that, Jiraiya. Unohana might be the greatest healer in the Soul Society, but if you get on her bad side they'll be picking up pieces of you across the Rukan district, and it'll take them at least a century to find them all. Well, you know what they say, Jiraiya replied with a laugh, fortune favors the bold. Unohana giggled, but there was a hint of steel behind it that sent a chill down Itachi's spine. Perhaps so, or perhaps not. Lady Luck is a fickle mistress, after all. You'd best be prepared for whichever way her mood swings, Jiraiya. She turned her gaze back to Itachi, and it once again took on that maternal warmth she had blessed him with earlier. I believe that should do it, then. Rub your chest and tell me how it feels, Itachi. After she had removed her hand and he had put his shirt back on, Itachi did as she ordered and was surprised with what he found. It feels good. The internal damage I took from those hits before. You were really able to heal it all so quickly. Unohana nodded. Normally I would still advise that you take it easy for a few days, but since the entrance exams are tomorrow I fear you will not have that luxury. Do not worry, though, I shall take special care of you when the time comes for your physical. What about me? Said Jiraiya with a sly smile, will I get any of that special care, Lady Unohana? Unohana laughed, adding a noble title to my name will not aid your chances, but I suppose it will not hurt them either. Yoruichi held out her hand. Can you stand, Itachi? Allowing her to pull him to his feet, Itachi didn't feel any worse for the wear, which was rather remarkable considering the harrowing fight he and Jiraiya had gone through just a little while ago. I think I'm all right. Thank you, both of you. I owe you my life, and I promise that I will find a way to repay you. Anytime, said Yoruichi with a wink, and don't sweat it. It'd be a shame for a guy like you to end up as hollow bait. Next to him, Jiraiya switched gears and gave the two women a formal bow. You have my gratitude as well. I won't forget this night. I'm in your debt. You are most welcome, Jiraiya, said Unohana. You two should find someplace safe and get some shut-eye, said Yoruichi. Exams start pretty early, and I know you two don't know your way around the Soul Society very well yet. Can you at least make it to the Seraite by sunrise? Itachi nodded. Yes. No problem, said Jiraiya. Good, Yoruichi replied. Wait in front of the White Road Gate. That's the western entrance to the Seraite. The gatekeeper's Jidanbo Ikanzaka. Don't let his size give you the wrong impression, he's actually a pretty nice guy once you get to know him. I'll have one of my subordinates waiting to escort you two to the academy. Don't worry about knowing what she looks like, I'll give her your descriptions, so she'll know you when she sees you. Do be careful, said Unohana, it would be a shame for either of you to get hurt on your way to the Seraite. They'll be fine, said Yoruichi with a smile. Come on, Unohana. We should get back before our lieutenants start worrying about us. Hold on, Yoruichi, said Unohana, aren't you forgetting something? Yoruichi raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Unohana simply nodded at her, and apparently that was enough for her to get the hint. Oh, crap, my Haori. I must have left it at the bar. I hope it's still there. Man, Kazuki would tease me for weeks if it got stolen. You'd best go back and grab it, said Unohana with a laugh. I'll meet on you on the road. Yoruichi nodded before giving Itachi and Jiraiya one last smile and wink. Sounds good. See you guys tomorrow. The two women disappeared a split second later, leaving Itachi and Jiraiya standing by the river. Itachi certainly had a great deal to mull over, but he couldn't help but notice that Jiraiya was looking at him again. What is it? He asked. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. I'll let it go for now, but sooner or later you and I are going to need to talk about what you did back when we were both still alive. I'm not necessarily saying that I'll believe every word you say, but it sounds like you at least have a case to plead, and I'll let you do that before passing final judgment. Itachi nodded. I understand. I would expect nothing less from one of the Sannin. Jiraiya chuckled. Don't make us out to be saints. Hell, you met Orochimaru, you know full well how far we can fall. Agreed, said Itachi. Still, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. The third Hokage would be proud. Jiraiya smiled. Yeah, I suppose he would. Who knows? Maybe we'll run into him somewhere up here. It's a pretty big afterlife. That it is, said Itachi. Jiraiya turned to go, giving a brief wave over his shoulder as he did. See you tomorrow, Itachi Uchiha. Yoruichi whistled with relief as she caught up to Unohana. I lucked out. It was still draped over the chair right where I left it. Unohana and smiled. That's good to hear. Fortune really does seem to favor us tonight. Yoruichi nodded and grinned. Yeah, no kidding. Here I was thinking the two of us would just grab a friendly drink before getting buried in work from tomorrow's entrance exams, and we wound up not only taking out some hollows but finding some star students as a bonus. Talk about a win-win, right? Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, Unohana replied. They still have to make it through the exams, after all. Yoruichi waved her hand dismissively. Come on, Unohana, you saw the way they handled that first hollow. They had no control whatsoever over their spiritual pressure, but they still found a way to take it down. If they can pull that off, then they've got the entrance exams in the bag. Unohana gave a soft laugh. I suppose we'll find out soon enough. Indeed, we will, she mused, her thoughts lingering on the black-haired young man in particular. I can't wait to see what you can do, Itachi Uchiha. The next day. It wasn't hard for Itachi to find his way to the western edge of the Seraite. Even with the incomprehensibly vast nature of the Soul Society, its governing heart and the seat of its guardians were impossible to miss. A circular city within yet distinctly separate from the sprawling Rukan district, it was still large enough to utterly dwarf every shinobi village that Itachi had ever laid eyes upon. Although it appeared to be open, from what Itachi had learned there was an enormous wall hidden in a different dimension that could descend at the moment someone attempted unauthorized entry. Even though he could currently only see the outskirts of the Seraite and the large hill at the heart of it, Itachi could not fail to notice how much sturdier and cleaner the walls and buildings within that region were when compared to those of the Rukan district. It all appeared so much more orderly and secure, and it was yet another sign of the broad gap Itachi had discerned between the privileged and the poor of the Soul Society. It would seem that all religions who preached of a utopian afterlife were wrong, he mused as he strode towards his destination. I know that this is not hell, but it would seem to be far from a perfect heaven, either. The morning sun was just beginning to creep over the horizon as Itachi approached the Seraite. He had left early enough as it was, but even then, he'd had to move at a very brisk pace in order to arrive on schedule. In fact, he'd departed so early that he was gone before the shopkeeper had even gotten out of bed. Itachi had felt bad about leaving without saying goodbye in person. After all the old man had done for him, it seemed rude to slip out without a word like that. He hoped that the note he'd left for the proprietor before his departure would suffice and that the old man would not take offense at the manner of his leaving. He spotted Jiraiya up ahead, but his attention was quickly drawn away from the Sannin and towards the being the sage was conversing with. It was an absolute giant of a man, so much so that he was taller than any house Itachi had ever seen in the Hidden Leaf village. He wore a black robe with a white sash that reminded Itachi of what he'd seen Unohana wearing the night before, only this one lacked a haori. It also only covered up to the right shoulder of the giant's torso. The left side of his chest was exposed, while the shoulder and upper arm were covered in thick armor. His black hair was tied in a ponytail that fell down to his waist, while his sideburns continued all the way down to his neck and were long enough to be tied in small tufts at the end. Capping off the ensemble was a red hat with yellow tassels. Itachi could detect a set of faint outlines on the giant's robe, and after a moment he realized that the titan of a man was concealing 2 incredibly large axes within his uniform. Remain calm, he told himself as he walked forward, and do nothing that might provoke a confrontation. In my current state, I doubt one would end well for me. As he got closer he saw that Jiraiya appeared quite relaxed in the presence of the colossal, and he recalled Yoruichi's words from the night before. The gatekeeper's Jidanbo Ikanzaka, don't let his size give you the wrong impression, he's actually a pretty nice guy once you get to know him. The 2 men turned to face him as he came forward, and Jiraiya gave him a nod. Morning, Itachi, I thought for sure you'd beat me here. I'm not late, am I? He asked. Jiraiya shook his head. You're good, haven't spotted anyone that might be Yoruichi's subordinate yet, and she did say she wanted us here at sunrise, so as far as I can tell we're right on time. Itachi turned to the gatekeeper. You must be Jidanbo Ikanzaka. The giant nodded. I am. Captain Shihoin told me to expect the two of you. You're not planning on starting any trouble, are you? Itachi shook his head. No, you have my word on that. Jiraiya smiled. Mine as well. Don't worry, Jidanbo, we wouldn't do anything to make your job difficult. Itachi was surprised to see the gatekeeper offer a friendly smile in return. That's good to hear. Captain Shihoin seemed pretty excited about the two of you coming to take the academy entrance exams. I guess you two must be pretty special. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, I suppose that's one way to put it. By the way, there was another captain that we met last night, Hana. Did she swing by here by any chance? Jidanbo nodded. Yeah, last night with Captain Shihoin. I like her. Whenever I get hurt, she always patches me right up. Last time she even gave me candy. She can be pretty scary when she's angry, though, so don't do anything to make her mad. Jiraiya smirked. Did she happen to say anything about yours truly? Jidanbo's brow furrowed in thought. That depends. Are you the white hedgehog buffoon? Jiraiya's head slumped. White hedgehog buffoon. That's what she's calling me. Jidanbo grinned. Well, it was Captain Shihoin that said it first, but Captain Hana laughed and said it too. Pretty funny, right? Can I call you that, Jiraiya? Please don't, the Sannin groaned. Jidanbo chuckled. Okay, but only because you were polite. You had better stay polite, said a new voice, sharp and clearly female. I will not have you reflect poorly on Lady Yoruichi in even the slightest manner. There was a brief flicker in the air before a slender woman appeared in front of the three of them. Her shoulder-length black hair perfectly matched her solid black uniform, and there was a fierce light in her gray eyes as she evaluated Itachi and Jiraiya. Itachi noticed that she wore a wakizashi horizontally across her back, just like Yoruichi had the night before, only with a yellow hilt instead. Unlike Yoruichi, her uniform was not backless or sleeveless, but instead it was much more conservative, covering everything except her hands, neck and face. Jidanbo's eyes widened at her sudden appearance. Miss Soy Fan, forgive me, I didn't see you approach. No matter, Soy Fan replied dismissively, her gaze still fixed on Itachi and Jiraiya. You're the candidates Lady Yoruichi spoke of this morning. Itachi gave her a polite bow. My name is Itachi Uchiha. Jiraiya grinned as he looked her up and down. I'm Jiraiya. It's a pleasure to meet you, miss. She folded her arms. I am Soy Fan, member of Squad 2 in the Executive Militia, as well as the head of Lady Yoruichi's personal guard. Address me as Miss Soy Fan or not at all, do you understand? The no-nonsense type. I see, Itachi mused. I wonder how that plays with her captain. Yoruichi seemed pretty relaxed last night, even when she was fighting the Hollows. I can't picture her subordinate here acting so casual about such a skirmish based on first impression. Yes, Miss Soy Fan, said Itachi, not wanting to make a fuss. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Well, I see someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Are you always so high-strung, little lady? Her response was a death glare, one which only intensified as Jiraiya seemed to simply laugh it off. Itachi simply stood to the side, not sure how to respond to this unusual and slightly amusing situation. Call me, little lady, again, she said with a dark edge in her tone, and I will rip your testicles off and feed them to you. Jiraiya's eyes widened, but he didn't actually seem intimidated by her threat, more amused than anything else if the smirk on his face was anything to go by. Touchy, aren't you? All right, there's no need for that kind of language, Miss Soy Fan. I think we just got off on the wrong foot. Soy Fan sighed. I don't know what Lady Yoruichi sees in the likes of you. Personally recruiting candidates for the academy entrance exams is beneath her. If I had been present when you two had met her I would have sent you packing. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, it wasn't just her, Hana was along for the ride, and I don't know how things would turn out for you if you'd argued with her. I doubt it would have ended well for you, though. That's Captain Hana to you. Soy Fan snapped, although at the same time she did seem to recoil ever so slightly at that name. It would seem that the Soul Society's healer has a reputation for more than just her medical abilities, Itachi thought, and judging from Soy Fan's reaction, it is not entirely that of an angel. I wonder what the story is behind that. The black-haired woman then turned and motioned for the two of them to follow. We've wasted enough time as it. Come with me, the entrance examinations are due to begin soon. I was instructed by Lady Yoruichi to bring to the academy on time, and I will not fail any mission that she gives me. Well, you heard her, said Jiraiya as he gave the gatekeeper a friendly wave. See you around, Jidanbo. Itachi nodded. Farewell. The giant smiled. Good luck with the exams. Come back and visit sometime. Yoruichi had been right about him, Itachi reflected as Soifon led them through the winding roads of the Seraite. The western gatekeeper really was much friendlier than his initial appearance might suggest. Regardless of the way things went with the entrance exams, Itachi resolved to stop by and visit the giant from time to time. After all, a being charged with guarding one of the entrances to the Seraite undoubtedly had some fascinating stories about the place and how he had ascended to his rank, and Itachi wanted to learn all that he could about the heart of the Soul Society. In the meantime, there was a matter that Itachi wanted to get cleared up. Excuse me, Miss Soifon. What is it? Asked Soifon, not even bothering to look over her shoulder at him. If you don't mind me asking, said Itachi, why did you refer to your captain with the title of lady? Is that typical for female captains, or is there something else to it? Now Soifon turned to face him, her eyes wide with shock. You mean you seriously don't know? There's a lot we don't know, said Jiraiya. We only arrived in the Soul Society a few weeks ago, after all. Soifon sighed, although Itachi was relieved to see that she didn't appear irritated like before. Her expression softened, and as she spoke Itachi could detect a very distinct note of pride in her voice. Lady Yoruichi is not only one of the captains of the 13 court guard squads, she said, but she is also the princess of the Tenshihaisoban, more commonly known as the Shihoin clan, one of the 5 great noble houses of the Seraite. Not only is she of the highest blood, but her combat abilities are amongst the greatest in the 13 court guard squads. She is not just the captain of Squad 2, but also the commander-in-chief of the Stealth Force and corps commander of both the Corrections Corps and the Executive Militia. She can fight in open battle or strike from the shadows, but either way no foe can hope to stand against her. Itachi nodded, recalling with perfect clarity her effortless trouncing of the 2 hollows she had faced off with the night before. I see. I witnessed her in action myself when we met. Her abilities were truly outstanding. He saw what looked like the faintest hint of a smile appear on Soifon's face, and Itachi took careful note of it. Apparently praising Yoruichi was a possible path to getting on her good side, and the former shinobi was more than willing to take advantage of it. Indeed, they are, she replied, with more than a hint of wistfulness in her voice, and it is my privilege to be her bodyguard. I have dedicated my life to Lady Yoruichi's protection, and I would not have it any other way. I'll never be as strong as her, but it is my dream to improve my skills so that I may continue to prove worthy of serving her. Jiraiya smiled warmly. That's an admirable goal. You truly are devoted to the captain, aren't you? She's lucky to have such a driven and dedicated protector. Much to Itachi's surprise he actually saw Soifon blush slightly at Jiraiya's praise. I'm simply doing my duty. It is commendable all the same, said Itachi, meeting her gaze. I owe your captain my life. Without the intervention of her and Captain Unohana, I have no doubt that Jiraiya and I would not be standing here. I wish to find some way to repay the debt I owe to her, and if becoming a Soul Reaper means that I may have the chance to serve in her squad and help her as you do, then that is a path that I would like to pursue. He saw Soifon's eyes narrow as she considered his words. Lady Yoruichi told me about your encounter, and how you and your companion were able to defeat a hollow despite being unarmed and untrained in the Soul Reaper fighting arts. From what she described, it would seem that you two have a great deal of potential. If that is the case and you are able to make it through the academy, then there is always the chance that you could be recruited into either Squad 2 or the Stealth Force. However, neither group is a forgiving one to its members. Lady Yoruichi is kind, but we are still expected to perform our duties with the utmost dedication. If you join our ranks, you must be prepared to be pushed far harder than you ever were at the academy. Itachi nodded. I understand. As do I, said Jiraiya, his tone completely serious. He was surprised to see her smirk. Maybe, just maybe, you two might have what it takes. Lady Yoruichi must believe that you do, otherwise she would not have asked the two of you to enroll. I will try to set aside my personal assumptions and give you the chance to prove that her faith in you is not misplaced. That's all that we can ask, said Jiraiya with a grin. Are we almost there? Asked Itachi. We've been walking for quite some time, now. Soifon nodded as she pointed up ahead. It's just around that corner. As they rounded the bend they came to a stop, and Itachi saw Soifon smile. There it is, Shino Academy. Seeing it like this really takes me back. Itachi hadn't known what to expect, but it wasn't this. His only experience with learning institutions was his time spent at the academy at the base of the Hokage mountain in the village hidden in the leaves, and while that had been a large facility, it was absolutely dwarfed by Shino Academy. In a way, it appeared to be a miniature version of the Seraite itself, but even then, its sheer size made it seem like something more akin to an actual town than simply a school. The front entrance was a traditional and pristine white wall and gate, but beyond was a truly expansive campus. An enormous multiple-story building held central prominence, but even from their position just outside the entrance, Itachi could tell that it wasn't the only structure involved in the educational institution. There were several smaller annexes and other facilities that seemed to be part of the overall operation. He couldn't even begin to imagine what it might be like inside. Jiraiya whistled next to him. Boy, they sure do know how to make 'em big in the Soul Society, don't they? How large is the student body? Asked Itachi. Several thousand at any given time, Soi Fan replied, and that's not counting the instructors and support staff. Shino Academy is nearly 2,000 years old, and it's gone through several renovations and upgrades in its time. It would seem that the list of prospective enrollees for this year alone is quite a long one. Itachi could see that quite clearly. Theirs was hardly the only group outside the main entrance at the moment. He could spot several people wearing the uniforms of full-fledged Soul Reapers, but there were many more who were dressed not too differently from him and Jiraiya. It was impossible to get an accurate count at the moment, and even then, it would not be a complete picture of the candidates for enrollment, since that wouldn't be including those who had already entered the campus grounds. In addition to those who wished to enroll this year, Itachi could spot scattered groups of people who wore robes similar to those of actual Soul Reapers, but in this case based on their body language he guessed to be actual student uniforms, blue and white shihakusho for males, red and white for females. As he studied the crowd he became aware of Soi Fan's gaze lingering on him. This wasn't quite the same intense scrutiny she had given him and Jiraiya before. In fact, she seemed more curious than anything else. Is something wrong? He asked after a moment. Soi Fan blinked before responding. Your last name, it's Uchiha, yes. Itachi nodded, wondering what she was getting at. That's correct, have you heard it before? Soi Fan's only response was to peer closer at him for a moment before turning away and walking towards the gate. If you manage to graduate, I'll answer that question. Come with me, we're running out of time. Itachi looked at Jiraiya, who simply shrugged before following Soi Fan. With nothing better to do, Itachi fell in behind them. After passing through the gate in the front courtyard, they went inside the main building. It was even more crowded in there than it had been on the outer plaza, and it took them a few minutes to work their way through the throngs of people to what appeared to be their destination, a very large meal hall. Several lines of enrollees stretched across it, and at the far end Itachi spotted several desks set up with what appeared to be academy faculty sitting behind them. Pick a line and get registered, said Soi Fan. Don't worry about being late, it's only when the doors to this hall close that the cutoff for tardy applicants goes into effect. Once they're shut, anyone who's not in here will have to wait until next year to take another shot at the entrance exams. As long as you're in one of the lines in this hall, you'll be guaranteed a spot in the first phase of the exams. Understood, said Itachi, thank you. Yeah, said Jiraiya, it would have been hard to get here without a guide. We owe you one. Hardly, Soi Fan replied, I was simply carrying out Lady Yoruichi's instructions. This is as far as I go. Best of luck, Itachi. And to you as well, Jiraiya. Jiraiya smirked. Can we boost my chances of success with a little kiss? Just a peck on the cheek will do. Soi Fan was positively seething. You know what, I take it back. Itachi, I wish you good luck. Jiraiya, I hope you wash out in the first phase and then get stung by a swarm of angry hornets. Itachi shook his head as he watched Soi Fan leave the room. You have a way with women, you know that. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, of course I do. I was a successful romance novelist when I was still alive, after all. Oh, maybe I should pick the pen back up again. I bet there's a serious market for the Makeout Paradise series in the Soul Society. Is it possible to get into legal trouble for plagiarizing your own work when you're in the afterlife? Asked Itachi as he and Jiraiya got into line. Jiraiya's brow furrowed. You might be onto something there. I might need to start a new series. If any of these people read my books when they were alive, then they'll be hungry for something fresh. Guess I'll have to start storyboarding later. I'm sure there's plenty of material out there just waiting to be put to print. You do that, said Itachi dryly, wondering how the legendary Sannin could think of writing a new book at a time like this. Completing the registration process didn't take as long as Itachi had initially feared. The lines moved quite quickly considering their size, and once the two of them got to the front they were each given a sheet of paper and asked only to write their names and the district that they had resided in before coming to the Seraite. After that there was nothing to do but wait, so both Itachi and Jiraiya took advantage of several tables with refreshments on them set up on the other side of the hall. "So," said Jiraiya after a while, "how many do you count so far?" Scanning the hall, Itachi quickly came up with a rough amount. 2,000, give or take 100 or so. Jiraiya nodded. "Same here, looks like your eyes are still sharp even without the Sharingan." "So it would seem," said Itachi before noting new activity where they had first come in. "It looks like that number should stay that way, they just shut the doors." Jiraiya stretched before sitting down and leaning back against the wall. "In that case, we might as well kick back and wait for our lovely proctor." "That's right," Itachi recalled as he joined Jiraiya, "Yoruichi's overseeing our exams. Is this something she does every year, or does she rotate with the other captains? I should ask her once I get the chance." The lines gradually dwindled down before disappearing entirely about 20 minutes later. 10 minutes later one of the doors to the meal hall opened again, and none other than the lady of the hour walked in, Yoruichi. Save for the addition of a white-sleeved haori, her outfit was the same as the night before, and Itachi once again could not help but admire her athletic form. She spotted Itachi and Jiraiya almost immediately, but apart from giving them a smile and a wink she did not acknowledge them. "All right, listen up everyone," she shouted. "I'm Yoruichi Shihoin, captain of Squad 2 and the proctor for this year's Shino Academy entrance exams." She then gave the crowd a sly grin. "And believe me when I tell you that you're going to wish you'd gotten anyone but me by the time we're through." "I wonder if she's serious or bluffing," Itachi mused, more than a little humored by the nervous expressions that were popping up on the faces of applicants across the hall. "I suppose we'll find out soon enough." She then pointed to the door behind her. "Now, first order of business, I want you all to head out that way and hang a right. Auditorium A-1 will be down the hall a little way on the left side. Phase 1 will take place in there. Get moving, people." As the crowd began to move, Itachi carefully studied the face of his proctor. The little smirk she wore as she watched the applicants file out the door told him that she was definitely enjoying the effect her earlier warning was having on the crowd. She clearly was the kind of person who enjoyed a little bit of teasing, and if she wanted to play head games with the applicants then Itachi was more than ready to roll with it. "An auditorium, huh," said Jiraiya as they followed the crowd. "Guess they're getting the written portion out of the way first." "Just like the Chunin exams," said Itachi. "I wonder what sort of rules apply here." Jiraiya chuckled. "We'll find out soon enough. Man, this really takes me back now that you bring up the Chunin exams. Well, I guess that was literally a lifetime ago now, wasn't it?" "I see you're having no problem picking up afterlife humor," said Itachi. "Humor is the spice of life," Jiraiya replied with a smirk. "You Uchihas could certainly do with a little more of it." "I won't deny it," said Itachi, seemingly taking Jiraiya by surprise with that remark. "If our clan had learned to loosen up a little more, perhaps its downfall could have been avoided. I suppose we'll never know now." Jiraiya seemed to be regarding him carefully as they entered the auditorium. He undoubtedly had questions regarding what had really happened to the Uchiha clan, but much to Itachi's relief the Sannin apparently felt that now was hardly the time or the place to press the issue. The two former shinobi found seats in the middle of the hall and waited patiently for everyone else to file in. Once all the applicants were seated he saw Yoruichi take her place at the head of the auditorium, while on both sides of the room Itachi several academy faculty members. Yoruichi cleared her through before addressing the applicants. "All right, listen carefully, because I'm only going to go over this once. As you've likely guessed by now, Phase 1 of the exam is the written portion. This is not an academic test. That being said, there is a scoring criterion, and if you can't meet it then you're out." She nodded at the staff assembled on both sides of the hall, who quickly began passing out exam sheets and pens. "Make sure to write your names clearly at the top of the front page. Answer each question truthfully and to the best of your ability, and you will make it through the first phase. As long as you are being honest with both the test and yourself, there is no wrong answer. However, leaving any questions unanswered is unacceptable, and you will be disqualified from enrollment if we review your test and found that you skipped one or two. Peeking at another applicant's test or attempting to collaborate with a fellow applicant will be grounds for immediate disqualification, as will lying on any of the questions, no matter how great or small the deception may be." A devious smirk came to her face. "And trust me, I will know if you're lying." "She's not bluffing here," thought Itachi as he studied the look in her eyes, which means she has some way to ferret out deception among the applicants. What sort of method could that be? Yoruichi glanced back at the clock on the wall before turning to the applicants again. From my mark, you will have 2 hours to complete the test. Once it is complete, simply bring your copy forward and put it in one of the baskets on the desk. After that you will return to the meal hall and wait for Phase 1 to reach its conclusion. Anyone who's disqualified will be escorted by one of the staff to the front gate of Shino Academy. There are no appeals, so if we boot you you'll just have to try your luck again next year. The pens and test sheets made it down to Itachi and Jiraiya, and Itachi saw the Sanin's eyes widen ever so slightly as his fingers touched his pen. Itachi found out why a moment later when he received his pen. There was a very slight tingling sensation in his fingertips at the moment of initial contact. It would be easy to write it off as pre-test jitters, but paper examinations hadn't particularly fazed Itachi in the past. His eyes narrowed as he carefully considered the writing utensil before turning back to Yoruichi. Her gaze met his, and the knowing light in her eyes was enough to convince Itachi that it wasn't a simple case of excitement or nervousness that had elicited the earlier sensation in his fingers. These weren't normal writing tools that had been given to them. There was something about them that Itachi suspected was explicitly linked to this test. He closed his eyes for a moment and concentrated solely on where his fingertips met the pen. For a few seconds he felt nothing, but then that slight tingle made itself known for just the briefest of moments. In that split second Itachi realized that it was more than just his skin that was touching the pen. A tiny bit of his spirit energy had leaked out and made contact with it as well. Opening his eyes again and glancing to the right, he saw Jiraiya carefully regarding his writing utensil. He looked briefly at Itachi before returning his gaze to the front of the room with a small smirk on his face. Whatever game Yoruichi was playing with this test, the Sanin had clearly decided to go along for the ride. As will I, he thought. I've come this far, after all. He saw Yoruichi look over her shoulder at the clock on the wall again. All right, then, your test begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. After writing his name at the top of the first page, Itachi decided to forego answering the questions right away and instead skim through the test as whole. Roughly the first page consisted of entirely trivial questions, favorite foods, hobbies, whether the applicant was an early bird or a night owl, and other small matters. However, after that the questions became much more serious, delving deep into the beliefs and philosophies of the applicant and how they might respond to particular situations. Itachi quickly began to comprehend what Yoruichi had meant when she had said that this wasn't a typical academic quiz. They're having each of us build a psychological profile of ourselves, he realized. I can definitely understand why she emphasized honesty earlier. Still, how would they enforce it on a paper quiz? There's no way that they could already know the background of every single applicant. Jiraiya and I can't be the only ones who are here by little more than virtue of a chance encounter with a Soul Reaper, after all. He went back to the first page and was about to start answering the questions when he heard a student cry out. What the hell? Every applicant in the auditorium turned towards the source and found a young man standing up. That wasn't the attention grabber, though. It was the fact that his paper had suddenly ignited in a burst of crimson flames. At the front of the room he saw Yoruichi shaking her head, very much the picture of a disappointed teacher. Really, you couldn't even make it past the first page without fudging something? That's just sad, kid. You're wrong, the applicant protested, although just from how pale his face was and how high his voice had become Itachi could tell that he was full of crap. You can't prove anything. Yoruichi smirked. I have all the proof I need. It's right there in those flames. You were warned, kid. You have no one to blame but yourself. How the hell? The applicant stammered as he looked frantically back and forth between his burning test and the proctor. Yoruichi rolled her eyes. If you can't figure it out, then you won't be ready to join our ranks for at least 100 years. Get him out of here. While most of the applicants watched nervously as the washout was escorted from the hall, Itachi's gaze was focused elsewhere, the failures exam. The crimson flames burnt themselves out a moment later, but there wasn't so much as a scorch mark on the surface of the desk beneath. Itachi turned his attention back to his pen, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. So this is the enforcement mechanism, he thought as he studied the pen in his hand. I don't know how, but it's somehow able to discern whether or not we're telling the truth based on the hints of spirit energy that it takes from us. The flames had done more than just expose a liar, they had also given Itachi new insight into just how difficult this test would be. On the surface, telling the truth in what was essentially an elaborate personality quiz didn't sound all that hard, but it didn't take much effort for Itachi to see past that and find the true obstacle, the test taker's internal biases. No matter how self-aware people claim to be, it was only natural for most of them to have a positive view about themselves. To truly pass this test would require the ability to peel back misconceptions and biases that had been built up over the years and be willing to face up to one's flaws. This was not just a psychological profile. It was an inquisition in which the subject was also his or her own interrogator. Itachi took a deep breath before closing his eyes. An outside observer might think that he was meditating, and that wasn't too far from the mark. Before he could begin the test, he would have to mentally center himself. He would have to find the clarity of mind that was necessary for a proper and honest self-evaluation. Only then would he be ready for what lay ahead. It's fortunate that we have 2 hours for this phase of the exams, he mused. I'm going to need them. And another one's down, Yoruichi mentally hummed to herself. Another one's down, another one bites the dust. Man, they're really dropping like flies. I'll have to thank Kazuki for the pens later. Every other year before now it's just been special paper that inks out when someone lies, but thanks to these little toys everyone who manages to pass phase 1 under me will be whispering about it with fear long after it's over. The pens or the paper used the years before would have no effect on fully fledged soul reapers, but against the uninitiated it was a different story. Before someone underwent proper training, how their spirit energy was emitted depended in no small part on their emotional and mental state. Outbursts of anger, fear, joy, sorrow or other powerful feelings corresponded with stronger surges in spiritual pressure, but even much more subdued and controlled processes would trigger emissions and fluctuations. One of the subtlest of those fluctuations in spiritual pressure came when someone was lying. After learning how to truly control their spiritual pressure, the person in question could easily suppress those fluctuations entirely, but anyone who lacked that ability to regulate the energy within them was vulnerable. That was what the pens were designed to do. Exploit that vulnerability and turn deception against a liar. Of course, on the off chance that one of the applicants had already mastered proper regulation of their spiritual pressure, the pens would be reduced to little more than normal writing utensils. However, it was a very small percentage of applicants that had that sort of innate ability or prior knowledge, and Yoruichi was relatively confident that no one in her batch of enrollees possessed that degree of skill. Those who truly excel at this test aren't the ones who race forward and try to finish first, she thought with a smile as she studied the remaining applicants. Victory here requires patience and the capacity for true self-awareness. And it looks my 2 rookie hollow slayers from last night have precisely that. While the rest of the enrollees had undergone something of a minor panic attack after the first student had been disqualified, Yoruichi had immediately picked up on how Itachi and Jiraiya both closed their eyes and retreated inwards once the flames had died down. They had intuitively grasped the true nature of the test, and they were clearly not about to charge in blindly. The raven-haired young man had spent a full 20 minutes in silent contemplation before picking up his pen again, while his white-haired companion had taken a little less than 15 minutes to complete his inner preparations. However, now both were proceeding forward with boldness and resolve while many of their fellow examinees were faltering as the test went on. There was a loud thud as one of the bulkier students slammed his fists into his desk when his test was suddenly covered in crimson flames. This is bullshit. This is fucking bullshit. Yoruichi waved her finger. Do you kiss your mother with that mouth? There's a time and place for that sort of language, and phase 1 of the entrance exams isn't it. Come back next year. No, the young man growled as he glared at her. I demand a redo. I wasn't lying. Maybe not consciously, said Yoruichi. You were probably lying to yourself rather than the test, although it's really all the same as far as the exam's concerned. Now scram. You're making a scene. Do you know who you're messing with, lady? The petulant applicant snarled. My father. Cannot help you here, Yoruichi finished for him firmly, her eyes narrowing. Leave. Now. The young man hawked a fat wad of spit onto his desk and gave her a look of utter contempt. Or you'll do what, you uppity bitch? That was the last straw. In a single fluid motion Yoruichi stood up and initiated shunpo. A single flash step was all it took to close the gap between her and the failed enrollee, and a swift gut punch was more than enough to make her target double over before passing out entirely. Yoruichi then effortlessly tossed the unconscious oaf with one hand to a nearby assistant. Take out the trash for me, will you? The assistant, a blonde-haired girl, looked at her in a mix of awe and fear before hastily replying. Why yes, ma'am. Yoruichi then gave the rest of the applicants a hungry grin. Anyone else want to play, overgrown spoiled brat, with me? I'm game if you are. As she'd expected, none of the applicants took her up on the challenge. Most of them were appropriately terrified, although more than a few had looks of awe on their faces. Quickly picking out Itachi and Jiraiya amongst the crowd, she saw that the latter actually looked rather amused at what had just occurred. The former was harder to read, although as their gazes met Yoruichi could detect more than a hint of admiration in his calm and thoughtful eyes. "You're one cool customer, aren't you, Itachi?" she mused as she gave him a playful wink. "I like that." Dropping back into Shunpo, a single flash step later and she was back at the front desk. The exam continued apace once the majority of the remaining applicants were able to regain their wits, and Yoruichi did a quick headcount of the survivors. "We started out at 1,947 applicants," she thought as she finished her tally, "and we're down to 1,403 now. That's about on track with the average pace recorded for the first phase of prior entrance exams. Another straggler here and there might fall, but at this point I think I've got my crowd that's moving on to phase 2. All that's left for me to do now is wait for them to finish up." The minutes gradually ticked by, and 10 minutes after the 1-hour mark passed, applicants began to rise to turn in their tests. Periodically her gaze drifted over to Itachi and Jiraiya. As proctor, she wasn't supposed to play favorites, but their performance the night before was never far from her mind and she was genuinely intrigued with how they were tackling the first phase of the exams. 1 hour and 25 minutes later she saw Jiraiya stand up and walk forward. As he dropped his test into one of the baskets on the desk he gave her a smirk. "That was interesting," he said with a chuckle. "I'm looking forward to phase 2. Yoruichi gave him a sly smile. "Trust me, you won't be disappointed." At the hour-and-a-half mark Itachi rose and came forward. He lingered in front of her desk for a moment with a thoughtful gaze on his test before he dropped it into the basket. "Nice trick with the pens," he said. "That was unique." Yoruichi grinned. "That's what I was going for. Afraid I can't take all the credit, though. I had a buddy put them together for me. If you thought this was fun, just wait until you see what comes next." She saw what looked like the slightest hint of a smirk appear on his face. "Very well, then. Good thing you and Jiraiya got done relatively early, Itachi," she thought as she watched him leave the room. "I hope you take this chance to rest up, because phase 1's a walk in the park compared to what I've got set up for you in phase 2. The final half-hour passed relatively uneventfully. When time had finally run out, only 3 additional students had washed out, leaving an even 1,400 to proceed to the second phase. "I'll have to split them up into waves for phase 2, she mused as the last applicant left the room, "otherwise the field's gonna be way too crowded. 140 per wave should work just fine." There was a knock on the door, and Yoruichi smiled. She could tell from their spiritual pressure who they were. "Test's over, so come on in, Itaci." A tall, muscular, lightly tan-skinned man wearing glasses entered the room. His black hair was cornrowed and he continued to sport that large handlebar mustache that Yoruichi loved to sprinkle pepper in whenever he fell asleep at parties. The resulting sneeze was always worth a laugh or two. As both the Kido Corps commander and the Grand Kido chief of the Soul Society, he wore the standard black Soul Reaper uniform, but over that he sported an ornate dark blue robe with an upturned collar to signify his rank. The greatest spell master in the Soul Society and an old friend of Yoruichi's, Tessai Tsukubishi and his subordinates were to play an important role in phase 2 of the entrance exams, and the captain of Squad 2 wanted to make sure that they were all set to go on their end. "How did it go?" he asked as he shut the door behind him. "Pretty well, all things considered," she replied. "It wasn't quite as boring as I thought it'd be. There's a couple of special candidates I've got my eyes on, and they did pretty damn well from the looks of things. I can't wait to review their tests later. There was also an idiot who thought it'd be a good idea to pick a fight with me, so that was entertaining." Tessai winced. "I do hope that you refrained from doing any permanent damage to the buffoon in question." Yoruichi laughed. "Come on, Tessai, you know me. I just gave him a little love tap and sent him on his way." Tessai nodded. "Hopefully he'll learn his lesson from that encounter." Yoruichi shrugged. "If not, then he'd better pray he doesn't get Hannah as the proctor next year. She'd do far worse to him than I did." Tessai shuddered. "Very true." Yoruichi grinned. "All right, enough about people with brains the size of acorns. Are things ready on your end?" "Yes," said Tessai, "although I still have my reservations about this." Yoruichi's eyes narrowed. "You were able to get enough specialists, right?" Tessai nodded. "Of course. Then you've got nothing to worry about," said Yoruichi. "After all, I'm just looking to sting them, not kill them. If you've got enough people with that kind of finesse with Kido, then everything will be just fine. Who knows, they might even adopt this as the permanent template for phase 2 in future entrance exams." Tessai chuckled. "Yes, and I bet you'd like it very much if they named it after you." Yoruichi giggled. You know me too well. How does the Shihoin gauntlet sound? Rather fitting, all things considered, Tessai replied. Yoruichi stood up and gave him a pat on the shoulder. That's why we're pals, Tessai. Come on, let's keep things rolling. After all, it's just starting to get fun. Leaning back against the wall of the meal hall, Itachi's mind was still preoccupied by the first phase of the examination. While he had indeed answered every question truthfully and to the best of his abilities, that didn't mean that it had been easy. Even after his initial period of contemplation and self-centering, tackling the test had still required a considerable amount of mental discipline and fortitude on his part. The fact that his exam copy hadn't burst into flames was certainly a good sign, but he had to wonder what Yoruichi and whatever aides she had would think when they reviewed his exam. Although Phase 1 was over and he was trying to get a little bit of relaxation in before Phase 2 began, he knew that he was still under scrutiny. It wasn't hard to find the source. Although Jiraiya had pretended to focus most of his attention on his own test, Itachi had not missed how the sage had been quietly monitoring him throughout the written exam and was still observing him now. Itachi wasn't surprised in the least, though. After all, it wasn't as though fighting side by side one time could erase all the years that Jiraiya had viewed him as a threat to Naruto, and Itachi was sure that it would be a long while yet before the Sannin might finally be willing to completely remove the pall of suspicion from him. Perhaps that day would never come. If that were the case, Itachi wouldn't be sore over it. Regardless of his motives, he would not pretend that he deserved forgiveness for his past actions. I may not have been sent to hell, he thought grimly, but that does not mean that I have gained absolution in death. I doubt that's even possible for me at this point. So, said Jiraiya, dragging Itachi from his thoughts, how do you think you did? Itachi raised an eyebrow. The fact that I'm here with you would seem to answer that question. Jiraiya shook his head. That's not what I mean. Sure, we're both here, which means we both passed, but what kind of impression do you think you left? I would imagine that Yoruichi has already formed an impression of the two of us from the night before, Itachi replied. The written test will tell her more, but it's impossible to say whether our answers will reinforce those impressions or change them since we cannot presume to know what she is thinking. Jiraiya chuckled. I should have expected something like that from you. I doubt she'll be reviewing all of those tests by herself. She has to have help given the sheer amount, and if I had to guess I'd say that there'll be people who share her rank that'll want to review the written tests of those who make it through the entirety of the entrance examinations. Itachi nodded. I can see that. It would stand to assume that her fellow captains could use our written tests as a means to begin scouting potential new recruits for their decisions. Even if we haven't formally graduated or even made it into the academy yet, a test with a working enforcement mechanism to compel applicants to tell the truth would still provide them with valuable information. Jiraiya smiled. Indeed, it would be interesting to know who looks over our tests. Itachi shook his head. There's little sense in thinking about that right now. We need to be focused on preparing for Phase 2. Jiraiya smirked. Says the man who's been so lost in his own little world since he got back here that he hasn't noticed that I'm not the only one watching him. You're getting sloppy, Itachi. Taking a fresh look around the meal hall, Itachi noticed that Jiraiya was right. He was being watched, and by more than a fair share of the remaining applicants at that. And it didn't take him long to notice that the ones watching him were all women. Some things never change, he muttered, recalling all the girls who had vied for his attention back when he was openly serving the Hidden Leaf Village. Even in death, the ladies still go for the Uchiha, said Jiraiya, shaking his head. Some guys have all the luck. You can have mine if you want, said Itachi. I'm not here to chase every skirt in our class. Jiraiya grinned. You don't say. Well, then feel free to send them my way. It wasn't that Itachi was completely disinterested in women, but at the moment he truly was focused on passing the entrance exams. There was also the fact that the only girl who had managed to get romantically close to Itachi while he was alive had eventually paid the ultimate price. Tragically, she had been his first victim the night of the Uchiha clan massacre. Given those circumstances along with the aftermath of the slaughter of his clan, Itachi had been rather reluctant to pursue romance ever since. I wonder if there's a woman out there who could truly accept me and what I've done, he mused. The Soul Society is incredibly vast, but even then, the chances of one residing in it that would take me while knowing the full truth of me. It was at that moment that one of the doors to the meal hall flew open. In strolled Yoruichi, and Itachi found himself almost unconsciously rising to his feet. Jiraiya was right behind him, and Itachi barely noticed the smirk and knowing glint in the Sannin's eyes as he briefly regarded the former member of the Akatsuki. Yoruichi's gaze met Itachi's, and when she smiled the young man could not help but be intrigued by the warm and playful light in her brilliant golden eyes. As he regarded the captain of Squad 2 he almost didn't hear Jiraiya mutter under his breath. "So that's your type, eh?" "What was that?" asked Itachi. Jiraiya gave a faux innocent smile and shrugged. "Oh, nothing." Itachi returned his attention to Yoruichi as the captain addressed the remaining applicants. "First of all, congratulations on making it through Phase 1. Don't pat yourselves on the back just yet, though, we've still got 2 tests left, so you're far from out of the woods. Follow me and I'll take you to where we're holding Phase 2. Itachi and Jiraiya fell in with the rest of the applicants as Yoruichi led them out the meal hall and down the hall for a bit. A few twists and turns later they came to a door, and when Yoruichi opened it Itachi saw only a flight of descending stairs that were dimly illuminated by a series of torches on the wall. "Come on, people," she said with a smirk, "if you're afraid of the dark then you're not cut out to be a soul reaper." Not one of the applicants made to leave, but Itachi noticed that more than a few were nervous as the group began their descent. It took them several minutes before they finally reached the bottom, and it was no longer the wooden floor of the academy that was beneath their feet, it was cool and slightly damp stone. "We're quite some ways underground," he thought as he looked around. "I wonder what awaits us down here." He received his answer a few seconds later when the passage they were in opened up, revealing nothing less than an underground lake. The light of all the torches along the far walls reflected off of both the surface of the lake and the crystals that adorned the ceiling, meaning that the subterranean environment was surprisingly well illuminated. There was a slight drop from the ledge that they were on down to the surface of the water, which Itachi measured at roughly 2.5 meters, while the lake itself was dotted with hundreds of smooth stone pillars that were about the same height as the ledge. About a third of the way across the lake Itachi spotted a row of blue flags mounted on a series of stone pillars, while 2/3 of the distance to the opposite shore there was another row of flags, these ones green. There were scores of people on both sides of the lake, and Itachi noticed a sharp division in their ranks. Those that were positioned along the first 2/3 of the shoreline on each side appeared to be regular academy faculty or soul reapers, while those standing along the final third seemed to be from a different organization. They still wore black robes similar to those belonging to soul reapers, but their faces were obscured by white wrappings that covered the entire head, save for the eyes. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a solitary figure waiting on the far shore, a tall and well-built man wearing a black uniform with an elaborate blue robe over it. "Okay, people, listen up," Yoruichi barked. "This is Phase 2, known as the Pillar Run. Before I explain the rules, there's something that I need to know first. How many of you can't swim?" No one raised their hands, although the nervous looks of several of the applicants told Itachi that at least a few were lying. Yoruichi seemed to pick up on it as well, because her expression softened into one of gentle concern. "Now is not the time to refrain from speaking out," she said. "I promise that whether or not you can swim will not impact your ability to pass this test. This is purely a safety concern. The tests are important, but they're not worth your life. If you raise your hands I promise you will not be disqualified from the exam." After a moment, several students raised their hands, and Yoruichi nodded at several assistants who came forward with red ribbons. "Each of you who can't swim is to tie a ribbon around one of your arms. Make sure it's visible. If you fall into the water, raise that arm and one of us will retrieve you before you slip under. Is that understood?" After the applicants nodded, Yoruichi went on to describe the test itself. "Your goal here is simple. Using the stone pillars, you'll cross from this side of the lake to the other end. You'll be on a time limit of 10 minutes, and anyone who can't complete the crossing within that time frame will be disqualified. You will also fail the test if you fall into the water." Sounds straightforward enough, thought Itachi as he scanned the lake, but it can't be that easy. There has to be more to it than that. Once again, the rows of blue and green flags caught his gaze. Yoruichi hadn't mentioned them in her outline of the test, but Itachi was sure that they were there for more than just decoration. "Since there's so many of you, not all of you will be able to take this test at the same time," Yoruichi continued. "That's why we'll be splitting you up into groups of 140 each. All the groups not currently taking the test will wait upstairs until they are called. Once you complete the test you will return to the meal hall. You are not to tell anyone who hasn't taken the test yet anything about it. Disclosing any information whatsoever will be grounds for disqualification. Meaning that the later groups can't observe the earlier groups and learn from their mistakes," Itachi mused. "The course remains an unknown entity to each applicant. That settles it. There's definitely more to this than simply hopping across some stone pillars." Next to him he heard Jiraiya chuckle. "This should be fun." A little while later, the the groups had been formed. Itachi and Jiraiya were in the first wave, so they and their fellow applicants lined up along the shore while the others left the cavern. Yoruichi moved off to the side and raised her right arm. "Your test will commence on my mark," she shouted. 3, 2, 1, go. The applicants rushed forward, and it didn't take long for Itachi and Jiraiya to move to the front of the pack. Itachi had lost track of how many trips he'd leapt from tree branch to tree branch for kilometers on end back when he was alive. It was second nature for shinobi. Hopping across the much sturdier stone pillars was child's play for a veteran ninja like himself, but Itachi would not let himself become complacent. He was confident that Yoruichi had much more in store for them than a simple balance and speed exercise. Glancing to his right, he saw Jiraiya easily keeping pace with him. The late Sannin had an amused smirk on his face as he effortlessly leapt from one pillar to the next. He would even throw in the occasional flourish like a front flip or handspring just to spice things up. The sage was clearly enjoying himself. Still, the sharp glint in his eyes told Itachi that Jiraiya wasn't taking anything for granted in this exercise, and whenever the proverbial shoe dropped he would definitely be ready for it. Looking over his shoulder, Itachi realized that Yoruichi had completely vanished from where she'd been when she'd given them the order to start. As he scanned the area he was surprised to see that she was already at the opposite end of the lake standing next to the man with the ornate blue robe. He hadn't even seen her move, and yet she had apparently already cleared the entire course. "I have got to learn how she does that," he thought as he recalled her astounding speed from the fight with the Hollows and the incident with that one student during Phase 1 of the exams. "I won't rest until I figure it out." The row of blue flags was rapidly drawing near, and Itachi braced himself. He had a feeling that the real tricks hidden in this test would begin to reveal themselves once he passed them. Sure enough, as soon as he leapt past the flags and onto the next pillar his platform began to rise. Looking around, Itachi quickly realized this wasn't the only pillar in motion. All of the stone platforms had begun moving up and down. "So, it's a test of timing," he muttered under his breath as he plotted his course, already mentally compensating for this new obstacle. "Very well, then." As soon as the pillar he was standing on reached the apex of its ascent Itachi jumped. The increased altitude had given him an advantage in both visibility and the distance he could dover with a single leap, and he exploited it for all it was worth. He came down on a pillar that had just reached the halfway point of its climb, and he already knew which way he would jump next. A little way behind him and to the right he heard Jiraiya laughing. "All right, now this is more like it." Indeed, he mused with a smirk, it was far too easy earlier. "I wonder what other tricks they've got in store for us." Reaching the next pillar and waiting for it to rise a little more before making his next jump, Itachi took a moment to assess the other applicants. For the first time, he noticed just how far ahead Jiraiya and him had gotten. Most of the group was still working their way towards the blue flags. A few had already fallen into the lake, and those who couldn't make the swim to shore on their own were rescued by the assistants Yoruichi had positioned along the shoreline earlier. Returning his gaze forward, Itachi pressed on. He was neck and neck with Jiraiya, and while he didn't consider the test to be a race he did push himself a little harder to try to keep ahead of the Sannin. It hadn't taken long to work out the rhythm of the pillars, rise and fall, so the two former ninjas continued to make steady progress. The row of green flags ahead grew closer with each passing second, and Itachi was already bracing for the next surprise that passing them would trigger. He did note that the pillars holding those flags and the ones beyond them weren't rising and falling like the ones he and Jiraiya were currently on, but there was always the chance that could change once they reached them. He could feel a pair of eyes on him that weren't Jiraiya's, and looking ahead it wasn't hard to find them. At the end of the course, Yoruichi's gaze was locked on him like a hawk. Even from this distance he could see the smile on her face, and the mischievous flicker of light in her eyes made him suspect that what lay ahead would be much more formidable than just some rising and falling stone pillars. When he and Jiraiya crossed the line of green flags a few seconds later and entered the final leg of the course, the pillars ahead did not move. However, the people on both sides of the shore with the black robes and white facial coverings began to cross their arms before reaching out with one palm open, and they each took on a crimson-pink aura. The hairs on the back of Itachi's neck stood up as he realized what was coming, and he was dimly aware of the smirk disappearing from Jiraiya's face. "Hado 31, Shakaho!" cried the masked figures. Itachi dropped to his stomach on top of the pillar he was on, and not a moment too soon. A second later the air was filled with blazing red-pink spheres of spirit energy. Itachi and Jiraiya were both able to avoid taking any hits, and they were on their feet as soon as the immediate threat had passed. The two of them wouldn't have much of a reprieve, though. The robed and masked figures were already preparing another salvo. And now the true nature of the test is revealed, he thought as he raced forward. It's one of speed, balance, timing and, most importantly, spatial awareness. It'll be a gauntlet from here to the finish line. He moved as fast as he could, and even though he could no longer command chakra, he still advanced with the confidence he'd carried when he was amongst the living. Constantly assessing his surroundings to keep himself aware of both the pillars and the masked shooters on the shoreline, he plotted his final course to the finish line and made his final throw of the dice. His trajectory drifted slightly until he was as close to the middle of the course as he could be, all the while ducking and jumping to evade the flying balls of spirit energy. Instinct took over as he hit the home stretch, and with a fluid series of leaps and flips Itachi found himself on the shore almost before he'd realized that he'd made it. Catching his breath, he saw Yoruichi approach him with a proud smile on her face. "I knew you were something special," she praised. "Great job, Itachi." She then nodded past him as Jiraiya arrived on shore a moment later. "Same to you, Jiraiya. Too bad for you, Itachi's already set the new course record, he got you by barely over a second." Jiraiya chuckled. "Well, you can't win 'em all." Yoruichi jerked her thumb over her shoulder towards a torqulet passageway. "Head up that way and you'll eventually make it back to the surface. You should be able to find your way back to the meal hall from there. Just sit tight and relax. I'll come find you guys when it's time for the final phase. Remember, no blabbing to the others about what happened down here. I'd hate to have to disqualify the two of you after a run like that." Itachi nodded. "Understood. I'll see you in a little while, then. Have fun with the rest of the new meat," said Jiraiya with a smirk. Yoruichi grinned. "Oh, trust me, I will." Over an hour and a half later, the last of the surviving applicants had completed the pillar run and gone back above ground, leaving Yoruichi with a few free minutes to run through her sheet and do a fresh count. The attrition hadn't been quite as bad as she'd initially feared. There were still 1,207 applicants left in the running. "Looks like we've got a pretty strong pool of contenders this year," she thought with a smile. "Phase 2 is usually the one that gets the most washouts, and that was before I put my own spin on it." "You seem rather pleased with yourself," said Itaci. Yoruichi nodded. "You could say that. I do like to consider myself a good judge of talent, after all." "You're referring to the two men who finished at the head of the first wave," said Itaci. "I take it those are the two special candidates you mentioned earlier, yes?" Yoruichi grinned. "You got it. Pretty impressive, I would certainly say so," Itaci admitted. Her grin became a smirk. "Even more so when you consider that they took down a hollow bare-handed the night before, don't you think?" Itaci looked a bit taken aback. "You cannot be serious." "Oh, I totally am," Yoruichi replied. "Go ask Unohana if you don't believe me, the two of us saw the whole thing." Itaci shook his head. "That won't be necessary. I've known you long enough to be able to tell when you're joking and when you're not. Do you think they have what it takes to pass phase 3? Yoruichi nodded. "They've got strong spiritual pressure, even if they don't realize it yet. They'll be fine. That doesn't mean it won't be interesting to watch them in phase 3. Though, it's always fun to see how people's energy manifests in the crystal lens." "That it is," said Itaci. "Will you be needing any further assistance from myself or my subordinates?" Yoruichi shook her head. "Nope, phase 2 was all I required you guys for. Thanks for the help with that. I owe you one." "Not at all," Itaci replied with a smile. "I'm always happy to lend a hand. Enjoy the final phase of the exams. I look forward to hearing the results later." Yoruichi smiled. "Don't worry. After the captain's review is finished, you and Kazuki will be the first ones I come find. Catch you later." Now, then, she thought as she headed up the passage towards the surface, it's time to move forward to the final act. "I hope you're ready, Itachi." Once again, Itachi was back in the meal hall trying to rest up before the next phase of the exams. Once again, he was all too aware that people were watching him. Jiraiya had him under the scrutiny that he had come to expect from the Sannin since the exams had begun, but he was still surprised at how many of the applicants kept glancing his way. Initially several had approached him and Jiraiya after they'd returned from phase 2 in order to gain insight into what lay ahead, but the two shinobi had maintained their discipline and declined to answer all inquiries. After a while the applicants who hadn't taken the test yet gave up. The attention Itachi continued to receive from his fellow candidates for enrollment remained. It was especially noticeable amongst those who had actually been part of the same wave in phase 2 that Itachi and Jiraiya had been in when they'd taken the test. They could not believe that the two men had completed the pillar run so quickly and with such apparent ease. To his right he heard Jiraiya chuckle. "It's tough being famous, isn't it?" "I have no interest in fame or notoriety," Itachi replied, what others think of me is their business. It does not matter to me. Jiraiya smirked. Oh, yeah, does the same go for our lovely proctor? Itachi raised an eyebrow. Just what exactly are you implying? Don't bother denying it, said Jiraiya. In that last leg of Phase 2 you pulled out all the stops to finish first. You wanted to impress her. She's our proctor, Itachi replied coolly. Whether we pass or fail these exams is up to her. It's only natural for me to desire her to witness what talents I have, even with my powers reduced as they are. Really, said Jiraiya with a knowing look in his eyes, it was just for the exam score, you say. How come I'm having a hard time buying that? Because yours is the mind that came up with the Makeout Paradise series, Itachi quipped. You can't help but construe other meanings from the interactions between men and women. Jiraiya laughed. Is that what you think? Well, you might not be entirely wrong there, I suppose. It was just at that moment that one of the doors opened, and in walked Yoruichi. She wasted no time in addressing the remaining applicants. All right, everyone, follow me, she ordered. Phase 3 is this way. Itachi, Jiraiya, and the others did as they were told. Eventually the group found themselves inside a broad courtyard. There were rows upon rows of what looked like meditation mats, and sitting on each mat was a clear crystal about the size of a ball from a child's game. Congratulations on making it to the last phase of the entrance exams, said Yoruichi. Brains and skill have gotten you this far, but your final test is going to examine something else entirely, the quality of your spirit energy. She then gestured to one of her assistants, who brought her a crystal just like the ones on the meditation mats. Phase 3 is known as the crystal lens, and these rocks are the reason why. They're naturally forming crystals found in caves scattered across the Soul Society. These stones have a special property to them. They can create a visual manifestation of someone's spirit energy. Here's an example for you. She held the crystal in one hand and focused her gaze purely on that stone. Itachi's eyes narrowed as a white flame suddenly appeared in the center of the crystal. The flame rapidly expanded until the entire stone was bathed in its light. The spirit flames that appear in these crystals will allow my assistants and I to measure your spirit energy, said Yoruichi. These are the properties we'll be examining: the strength, durability, and most importantly the stability of your spirit energy. Don't be surprised if the flames that appear in your crystal aren't the same as mine. The color depends on the individual touching the stone. This phase of the exam will last a half an hour. In that time, my assistants and I will be wandering around the courtyard and monitoring your spirit energy. If either myself or one of my aides places a hand on your shoulder before time's up, that means you washed out. Everyone still in the courtyard at the end of the half an hour will pass the test. Passing the crystal back to her aide, Yoruichi gave the applicants her final instructions. When you hold the crystal in your hands, empty your minds of everything else except for the crystal. If you need to take some time to meditate before grabbing the stone, that's perfectly fine. Just remember that you don't have all day for this. Now, I want all of you to pick a mat and sit down. Phase 3 will begin on my mark. Itachi grabbed a mat towards the rear of the courtyard, while Jiraiya took the one next to him. The legendary Sannin looked perfectly at ease with the nature of the final test, which didn't surprise Itachi in the least. After all, Jiraiya had been renowned in the ninja world as a master of sage jutsu, which required plenty of meditation in order to gain proficiency in. An exercise like this would be a walk in the park for him. Sitting down, Itachi looked at the stone in front of him. He already had his approach in mind. Just like during Phase 1, he would take a little bit of time to center himself before beginning the test in earnest. 10 minutes of warm-up meditation should suffice, he thought as he watched Yoruichi, prepared to start his mental timer the second she gave the go-ahead. A moment later the captain raised her right arm. All right, then, 3, 2, 1, begin. Yoruichi sighed as she touched a red-headed girl on the shoulder. You're out, sorry. The girl's eyes widened as she stammered in protest. But I've barely even started. Yoruichi shook her head. You can't fool me, that crystal's all the evidence I need. It was true, the tiny crimson flame within the crystal was very weak, barely clinging to life. The pitifully small bit of spirit energy flickered and sputtered, far too inconsistent and frail for it to receive a passing grade. The girl hung her head in disappointment as the flame disappeared entirely a few seconds later. But, I worked so hard. This isn't the end of the line, said Yoruichi, giving the girl an encouraging smile. This just means that your spirit energy needs a little more time to grow. Build up your strength and come back next year. The academy's not going anywhere, I promise you that. She nodded at an assistant who came over to lead the girl out of the courtyard. Turning her attention to the rest of the applicants, Yoruichi's smile grew when she finally saw Itachi reach for his crystal. So he used 10 minutes for preparation, she mused, just like phase 1, he doesn't jump in without making sure he's ready. That sort of prudence will serve him well in the 13 court guard squads. Jiraiya had taken much less time to prepare than Itachi had, he had only spent 5 minutes in preliminary meditation. That smaller window didn't seem to hurt him in the least, though, for Yoruichi could see the blue-white flame within the crystal still burning brightly and steadily. The white-haired man seemed to be a natural at this exercise, and his was definitely the strongest flame that she had yet seen amongst the applicants. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Itachi closely. The raven-haired young man held the crystal in both hands with his eyes closed. For a few seconds, there was no activity whatsoever, but that changed the moment he opened his eyes. A black flame ignited, and it quickly grew until it came to dominate the entire crystal. It was an entrancing sight, and Yoruichi wasn't the only one drawn to it. All the other aides had ceased observing the rest of the applicants and were staring in awe at Itachi's crystal. "Impressive," she said softly, "most impressive." As much as she wanted to focus her attention solely on Itachi, Yoruichi forced herself to pull away and scan the class as a whole. There were still about 20 minutes left in the exercise, and it looked like everyone had manifested their flames of spirit energy within the crystal. From here on out it would be a test of endurance and stability. There was no rule that stated someone had to maintain their flame from the moment it ignited until the end of the test, but doing so certainly wouldn't hurt that person's final score. "It's too bad Unohana's prepping for the physicals right now," she thought as her gaze went back to Itachi and Jiraiya. "I bet she would have loved to see this." The minutes slowly went by, occasionally interrupted by Yoruichi or one of her aides informing a student that they had failed the test. By the time Phase 3 finally came to an end there were 1,105 applicants remaining. It actually was about the middle of the road as far as prior enrollment groups were concerned, but Yoruichi wasn't particularly interested in whether or not the exams proctored by her had the largest or smallest amount of people who were able to pass them. She was just glad that it was nearly over. She still had to go over the Phase 1 test results of those who had survived the whole process, but that was something she was actually looking forward to doing since she would have a considerable amount of help with it. "All right, you can all rise," she said with a smile. "Congratulations on making it through the last phase of the Shino Academy entrance examinations." A round of cheering went through the group of surviving applicants. Jiraiya had a pleased grin on his face, and while Itachi appeared more subdued, Yoruichi still caught a hint of a satisfied smirk from him. "Okay, settle down," she said after a moment. "Feel free to throw a party later, but there are still a few things we need to get out of the way before you can officially start your freshman year at the academy. For now, I want you all to return to the meal hall. You'll find members of Squad 4 waiting there. They'll be handling your physicals, so cooperate with them fully if you want to make sure you get to go to class on the first day of the semester. Once your physical exam is complete, you'll be taken to the student dorms. Orientation will begin tomorrow morning, so make sure you rest up." As the successful candidates began leaving the courtyard, Yoruichi called out to her two favorite applicants of the bunch. "Itachi, Jiraiya, come over here for a minute, will ya?" The two men glanced at each other for a moment before approaching her. The rest of the new students gave them curious looks before leaving the courtyard. Yoruichi didn't really care about impressions or appearances of favoritism now that the exams were officially over, especially since she had something special in mind for the stars of today's tests. She grinned as the two of them came up to her. "Well done, both of you. I'm pretty sure I'm not blowing smoke when I say that you two blew these tests completely out of the water." Jiraiya smiled. "Well, now, it's a pleasure to hear you say that. Any chance you can pass that praise along to Unohana?" Yoruichi smirked. "You can tell her I said that yourself. She'll be personally handling your physical, along with Itachi's. You two are getting the VIP treatment, so make the most of it." Jiraiya chuckled. "Oh, I will. We weren't being given similar treatment during the tests without our knowledge, were we?" asked Itachi, his eyes narrowing. Yoruichi shook her head. "No. You two went through the exact same tests as everyone else. You just happened to be by far the most gifted candidates this year. I was rooting for you guys, but I didn't do any favors for you. You passed the exams on your own merits, and I wouldn't have it any other way." Itachi nodded. "I see. Thank you for that. My success here would have no meaning if it were not achieved honestly." Yoruichi smiled. "That's a good attitude to have. You'll go far in the academy, Itachi. Hell, I bet you'll be the favorite of all the teachers before the first week of the semester is up." Jiraiya folded his arms and grinned. "Oh, Yeah, what about me? Gifted class clown, all the way. Yoruichi replied with a laugh. At least, that's the vibe I get from you, Jiraiya. Jiraiya smirked. That sounds fine by me. Good, said Yoruichi. By the way, once your physicals are done, I want the two of you to return to the meal hall, alright? I'll swing by and pick you up. There's some people that I want to introduce you to. Colleagues of yours? Asked Itachi. Yoruichi grinned. Yup, you two scored one hell of an opportunity with the way you performed today. I'm gonna introduce you to some of the other captains later. They're gonna want to meet you when they see your test results, and don't be surprised if they start throwing out recruitment offers. If I know them, those'll start flying as soon as I tell them about the hollow incident, she thought. I'd like to get both of these guys into Squad 2 when they graduate from the academy, but if I have to share I suppose I can give up Jiraiya. That being said, you're gonna be all mine if I have anything to say about it, Itachi. How does that feel? Asked Unohana as she pressed her hand against his bare chest. Itachi closed his eyes for a moment before responding. Fine, I'm not feeling any residual pain from the night before. The captain of Squad 4 smiled. That's wonderful news. I was afraid that the rigors of the exams might exacerbate your wounds from last night, but it would seem that I was worried for nothing. I have you to thank for that, said Itachi as he put his shirt back on. The way you healed me last night was very impressive. I don't think I'm any worse for the wear. Unohana nodded. You're too kind. Still, it never hurts to take precautions. That was a sentiment that Itachi could wholeheartedly agree with. Sitting in the academy infirmary with the Soul Society's premier healer, he had patiently cooperated with her as she had conducted her examination. It was a very educational experience for him. While he had occasionally been treated by the Leaf Village's medical ninja during his time with the Anbu Black Ops, he actually had never gained as great a comprehension of their healing methods as he had of other jutsu. Being under the treatment of a healer who used spiritual energy as opposed to chakra for her medical arts was quite fascinating, and when he'd asked Unohana about her methods she had described them as a subset of the spell-casting powers known collectively as Kido. In this case, Kido for healing was known as Kaido, and the members of Squad 4 were all trained in it due to the unit's function as the medical core of the Soul Society. Well, said Unohana with a smile, I'm most pleased to give you a clean bill of health, Itachi. Itachi nodded. Thank you. Was it the same for Jiraiya? Unohana laughed. Yes, although his examination session didn't go quite as smoothly as yours. His behavior forced me to use less gentle means of treatment. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Less gentle. I suppose there's no harm in telling you, said Unohana with a smirk. While I was examining his shoulder I could not help but notice one of his hands had begun to, shall we say, wander. It became a little too adventurous for its own good, so I decided to teach it a lesson by demonstrating just how easily what was healed the night before could become damaged again without the proper care. Itachi suppressed a chuckle. He had a pretty good idea what had taken place given Jiraiya's reputation. I see. I'm sure it was a very valuable learning experience. I'd like to think so, Unohana replied. Is there anything else that I can do for you, Itachi? If you don't mind, he said, I actually had a question. It's regarding your powers as a healer. Unohana smiled. I'm always willing to educate others on the ways of Kaido. Ask away, Itachi. As the utilization of Kaido taught at Shino Academy? Asked Itachi. Unohana nodded. There are introductory courses offered, and members of Squad 4 frequently act as guest teachers. Those who show particular promise in this field are typically recruited into my division upon graduation. Itachi leaned forward. Isn't it unwise to have all of the Soul Society's healers concentrated into a single group? I can understand the organizational benefits, but wouldn't it be more prudent to have healers assigned to multiple divisions in order to improve first response times? You are not the first person to raise that concern, and it is a valid one, said Unohana. Within my division are rapid response and relief teams that are assigned to work with the rest of the 13 court guard squads, but I'll be the first to admit that the current system could use some work. We are particularly hamstrung by a certain regulation from the Central 46. Squad 4 members, with the exception of the lieutenant and captain, are not allowed to journey to the realms of the living without the prior authorization of the head captain. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Why? That doesn't make any sense. Healers are a valuable resource, Unohana replied. Our protection is given considerable priority. Without the members of Squad 4, the rest of the 13 court guard squads would not be able to function cohesively and effectively. Perhaps, said Itachi, but your hands are needlessly tied by this regulation. More to the point, from what I saw the night before it would seem that you personally require very little in terms of protection. Unohana smiled. Well, I'm the captain for more than just my skills as a healer. Other members of Squad 4 are capable of engaging in battle as well, but that is not their primary field of expertise. To specialize in the healing arts is no small thing. Expert Kaido practitioners devote many long hours to maintain and improve their medical skills, and this unfortunately means that they have far less time than others to devote to combat training. My gifts make me one of the few exceptions. I am very proud of the members of my division, Itachi, but one of the requirements bestowed upon me as captain is to recognize their strengths and weaknesses. If the time ever comes when members of Squad 4 must fight on the front lines, then it means we would be faced with a truly dire situation. Itachi nodded. I understand. I apologize for questioning you in such a manner. Unohana gave him a warm smile. You have nothing to be sorry for, Itachi. That you would ask such questions and argue against the current system in the desire to improve it speaks highly of your intellect. If anything, I should be thanking you for it. I've rather enjoyed this conversation of ours. I'd very much like for it to continue further, but I'm afraid that will have to be at another time. I do have other patients to see, after all. Of course, said Itachi as he stood up. I've taken up enough of your time as it is. Think nothing of it, Unohana replied. Oh, could you do me a favor? Name it, said Itachi. Unohana smiled again, but there was a shadow behind it that nearly made Itachi bolt for the door right there and then. Please tell Jiraiya that he'd best mind his wandering hands, lest he misplace them altogether. Itachi got the message loud and clear. He could only hope that Jiraiya would heed it. I'll do so. I'd greatly appreciate it, said Unohana, the warmth returning to her expression as if nothing had happened. Take care of yourself, Itachi, and best of luck with your upcoming classes. It didn't take long for Itachi to return to the meal hall. Jiraiya was sitting at a table munching on what looked like dried fruit, and Itachi joined him after grabbing some water. He saw the sage rub his left shoulder. No doubt Unohana's lesson from earlier still hadn't completely worn off. Your skirt chasing is going to be the death of you, said Itachi as he joined the Sannin. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, I can think of worse ways to go. I'm not so sure about that, said Itachi, recalling the chill he'd gotten from Unohana. If you try to cop a feel on the Squad 4 captain again, your afterlife could prove to be a short one. Jiraiya smirked. Is that the message she wanted you to give to me? More or less, Itachi replied as he looked around. Where's Yoruichi? Jiraiya shrugged. She hasn't come by yet. I'm sure she'll show up sooner or later. She did seem pretty eager to introduce us to her fellow captains, after all. That was certainly true, and Itachi wondered just how many they'd end up meeting before the day was out. Yoruichi and Unohana had been very impressive in their own right, and he couldn't even begin to imagine what the other captains would be like. If they were all as powerful as the two he'd already met, though, then he would be very thankful for the fact that they seemed to limit their activities to managing hollows and other affairs of the afterlife. Yoruichi and Unohana alone could do tremendous damage should they decide to turn their attentions towards the ninja world. Can Soul Reapers even interact with those who are still alive? He mused. I suppose that's one of the many things I'll learn once my new education begins. By the way, said Jiraiya, his expression more serious now, we need to talk later. About what? Asked Itachi. You know what, Jiraiya replied, his eyes narrowing. Naruto, the Akatsuki, your clan, all of it. I was originally going to put this on hold for a little longer, but now that we're through the entrance exams it's a different matter. The student body here has no idea who you were when you were alive, so if you're going to be attending class with them I need to be sure that you're not a threat. Ever the protective teacher, he thought, even though the students here are not under his tutelage. It's a little sooner than I had hoped for, but I can certainly understand his desire to move forward quickly with this. Very well, he said after a moment. Once we're settled in later, we can begin whenever you're ready. Jiraiya nodded. All right, then, you've got a little bit of goodwill thanks to that fight with the Hollows last night, but that goes out the window if you try to bail out on this, you got that? Understood, said Itachi. It was at that moment Yoruichi walked in, and from the look on her face she could already detect that something was brewing between Itachi and Jiraiya. Hey, what's up? You guys passed the exams, so why the sour vibes towards each other? Don't tell me you've already become rivals. Itachi shook his head. It's nothing like that. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, maybe not entirely like that. There's nothing wrong with a little healthy competition between men, after all. Isn't that right, Itachi? Whether you wish to compete with me in anything is entirely up to you, Itachi replied as he stood up. I'm here only to learn and to train. Is it time, Yoruichi? She nodded. Yes. I was going over test results with some of the other captains, and I think they're ready to meet you now. Sounds good to me, said Jiraiya with a grin as he rose to join them. This should be fun. Oh, yes, Yoruichi replied, but before we go, afraid I got to set a ground rule. I don't mind you guys being informal with me, I'm not really one for titles myself. That being said, some Soul Reapers are pickier about that than others, so it's better to be on the safe side. Itachi knew what she was getting at. Of course, what should we call you, then? We may not be full-fledged Soul Reapers, but we're no longer mere candidates for academy enrollment, either. What do students call captains or other officers in the 13 court guard squads? Soi Fon's a big stickler for my title of nobility, said Yoruichi, but I'd rather avoid that. If we're in front of Soul Reapers on duty, or teachers and their assistants here at the academy, call me Captain Yoruichi. I prefer that to my last name, and with the rank in front it's still formal enough that some of the stricter captains will let it slide if they hear you addressing me that way. Otherwise, if I'm just paying you a friendly visit, feel free to call me Yoruichi. Simple enough. Itachi nodded. Yes. Jiraiya shrugged. Fine by me, I was never really big on titles myself, so I get where you're coming from there. Yoruichi nodded. Good. Follow me, then. She led them down a corridor, and a few minutes later they came to what looked like a staff conference room. The captain of Squad 2 opened the door and ushered them in, and they were immediately confronted with an interesting variety of Soul Reapers. The first one to greet them was a tall, light-skinned man with gray eyes and wavy brown hair tied in a long ponytail. He wore a Sugagasa straw hat and a long and flowing flowery pink kimono over his white captain's haori. Tied at his waist were not one but two swords, a traditional daisho pairing of itachi and wakizashi. Both weapons had rectangular guards with the corners cut off, were decorated by patterns of lines and cherry blossoms, and each sported a dark blue handle. There was a decent amount of stubble on his jawline, and Itachi could detect a hint of sake on his breath. Well, now, who do we have here? He said with an easygoing smile. Are these the gifted new students you were boasting about earlier, Yoruichi? Yoruichi smiled. You got it. This is Itachi Uchiha and Jiraiya. Itachi, Jiraiya, meet Shunsui Kyoraku, captain of Squad 8. Nice to meet you, said Itachi as he bowed his head. Good to make your acquaintance, said Jiraiya before looking over the captain's shoulder and grinning, and who might your lovely companion be? Shunsui chuckled, and from the look on his face Itachi knew that the captain had already sensed a kindred spirit in Jiraiya. That would be my lieutenant. Come on, now, Lisa, it's impolite to withhold a proper introduction. Itachi regarded the Squad 8 captain second in command. She was a slender woman with turquoise eyes, red-rimmed oval glasses and raven hair that was braided into two pigtails. Her attire was a shortened variation of the standard black Soul Reaper robes, with her hakama resembling a skirt. The sword at her hip appeared to be a nodashi with a dark blue hilt and a square tsuba with two rectangular attachments on two ends, while a badge was tied to her left arm. She turned to face both of them, but after a moment Itachi could tell that she was more focused on him than Jiraiya. My name is Lisa Yadomaru, lieutenant of Squad 8, she said. It's a pleasure to meet you. A tall man with long white hair and a friendly light in his green eyes leaned forward. His white haori identified him as another captain, but unlike Shunsui his physique actually struck Itachi as slightly emaciated. His skin was slightly paler as well, and while there was a warm energy about him he did seem to be a little under the weather. A single katana with a rectangular bronze cross guard and a dark red handle was tied to the sash of his robes. Captain Shihoin has told us quite a bit about the two of you, he said. I'm Jishiro Yukitaki, the captain of Squad 13. Well met, my friends. So you two are Captain Shihoin's amateur hollow killers, said another man from across the table. It's not every day we get applicants with your kind of potential coming through the academy entrance exams. The speaker had very long blonde hair that flowed over his captain's haori. There was a sharp, evaluating look in his brown eyes even as he had an amused smirk on his face that revealed some of his teeth. A katana with a red hilt and sheath hung at his side, and its guard was shaped like an hourglass. Oh, sorry, the man continued, where are my manners? I'm Shinji Hirako, Squad 5's captain. Congrats on making it through the exams. Indeed, said a woman not too far down from him, your results were absolutely splendid. Taking a closer look at the new speaker, Itachi saw that she was a slender but very well-endowed woman. She let her long violet hair flow wild and freely over her captain's haori, and she had a very warm and cheerful aura. Itachi saw Jiraiya's smile grow as the Sannin feasted his eyes on the lady's ample bosom, and he could only hope that the sage didn't do anything that might get the two of them on this woman's bad side, especially since her katana was no doubt as sharp as that of everyone else's at this gathering. Hearing you say that is music to my ears, Miss, Jiraiya began. Oh, forgive me, said the woman with a friendly smile, my name's Kiryu Hakafuna, captain of Squad 12. Captain Shihoin won't stop singing your praises, and I can see why. As can I, said a deep-voiced man on the other side of the table, written test, the pillar run, and the crystal lens, you guys soared through on all three. It was another captain, and this one sported sunglasses and a round afro. He was definitely on the taller side and looked very well built as well. The katana at his side had a white hilt and a heart-shaped tsuba. You're too kind, Captain, said Itachi, waiting for the man to fill in the gap in his knowledge. Love, the man replied, Love Aikawa, Squad 7's captain. It's always nice to meet the new talent coming into the academy. The prowess the two of you showed in the exams is impressive for new recruits, said another man, his voice much gruffer in contrast to Love's smooth basso, killing a hollow without Soul Reaper training even more so. Who scored the final blow against the beast? The new speaker was a captain as well, and the way he carried himself strongly reminded Itachi of a Chunin drill master. A tall and muscular man with sharp features, his silver hair gave him a rather frosty look, which was further accented by the steely glint in his brown eyes. Despite the much more military air about him when compared to his colleagues, he actually sported a handful of piercings, with one on his left eyebrow and 3 on his left ear. As if that weren't enough, through the opening in his robes Itachi could spot what looked like the uppermost portion of a tattoo on his torso, and he was curious as to what the full design was. His weapon appeared to be a wakizashi with an H-shaped tsuba and white hilt. That would be me, said Jiraiya, although I couldn't have taken it out were it not for Itachi drawing its attention, plus he got a few good hits on it in his own right. So overall it was a team effort, Captain. Muburuma, the man finished for him, Kensai Muburuma, captain of Squad 9. I'm glad to see that you know how to share credit when it's due, that's important for maintaining good teamwork and camaraderie. Are you really that strong already? Came a female voice from behind Kensai, I wanna see you two fight. A second later a petite woman with wavy lime green hair popped up over Kensai's shoulder. In addition to her robes and the badge on her left arm, she also wore a pink scarf and a pair of glasses atop her hair. The sword at her side was an average-length katana with a green hilt and rectangular guard which had circles on each corner. Contrary to the captain she was lurking behind, Itachi's first impression of her was that she was rather perky. Kensai rolled his eyes. Mashiro, first of all, it's rude to tell two people to fight like that. Second of all, you should introduce yourself properly, it's polite. The woman nodded and smiled. Oh, okay, I'm Mashiro Kuna, lieutenant of Squad 9. Nice to meet you. Likewise, said Itachi. Jiraiya gave her a friendly smile. It's a pleasure to meet you. If I'd known the 13 court guard squads had so many lively women in them, I would have applied for the academy as soon as I arrived here. Which was barely over 2 weeks ago, Itachi quipped, so you still would have wound up taking the entrance exams today anyway. You got a point there, said Yoruichi as she sat down at the table before motioning for Itachi and Jiraiya to join her and the others. Then again, if you know Hana and I hadn't found you when we did then you wouldn't be here at all. Talk about good timing, huh? About that, said Jashiro, Captain Shihoin, which part of the Rukan district did you say you encountered them in again? West Rukan 37, Yoruichi replied. Shunsui stroked his chin. West 37, that's not good. Lisa's eyes narrowed. When was the last time hollows made it that far into the Rukan district? Years at the very least, Shinji answered, usually the closest they get these days are the 60s or mid-50s. I think our patrols are getting sloppy again. Or the hollows may be getting smarter, Kiryu countered, at the very least, they do seem to be getting bolder. Love sighed, lucky for us they were just common hollows this time. Can you imagine the damage a Manos Grande could have done had it gotten that far inside the Rukan district? Itachi raised an eyebrow. Manos Grande, what's that? Trust me, said Kensai grimly, if you saw one, you'd know, each one's taller than a palace. You get a Manos when hollows become cannibalistic, which is rather common with them. A bunch of the cannibal hollows try to devour each other, and they end up merging into a Manos Grande. They're not the smartest hollows out there, but they make up for it with brute force. Yoruichi shook her head. You're only describing Jillian's, Kensai. One of those alone would be a mess, but one that we could dispatch relatively quickly. And Ijuka's, on the other hand, would be much more problematic. Jiraiya leaned forward. Ejukas, can anyone explain that to us new guys? Oh, I know, chirped Mashiro, bouncing up and down in her seat. Kensai, can I answer? Can I? Kensai folded his arms. You don't need my permission to answer a question, you goofball. Shunsui chuckled. Looks like someone got more than her usual amount of sugar today. Ejukas are the second classification of Manos Grande, said Lisa. They're much smarter and stronger than Jillians, but fortunately are fewer in number. They are also smaller than Jillians, although one could argue that that particular quality may actually make them even more dangerous due to their increased mobility. Hey, no fair, Lisa, pouted Mashiro. I wanted to give the answer. Lisa shrugged. Then you should have given it right from the start. Mashiro sighed. Oh, man, it's just like the academy all over again. Itachi's eyes narrowed. If Jillians are formed from hollow cannibalism, then are Ejukas formed from Jillians eating each other? Kiryu smiled. You catch on quickly, don't you? My, you definitely found a sharp one here, Yoruichi. Yoruichi grinned. What can I say? I got an eye for talent. In truth, you may only be partially right, Itachi, said Jashiro. While cannibalism is a component of hollow evolution, we believe that other factors come into play when Jillians evolve into Ejukas, although at this stage these are only theories. What sort of factors? Asked Jiraiya. From what little we've been able to observe, Shinji chimed in, we think that the creation of an Ejukas is at least in part determined by which of the many hollows that made up the original Jillian is the dominant one. Love sighed. In truth, there's a ton we don't know about the Ejukas. The Soul Society's never really done an in-depth field study of them. Squad 12's supposed to hold most of the archived reports on them, though. Kiryu nodded. Indeed, although even then our knowledge is far from complete. Studying even Jillians is difficult when one recalls how rare it is to encounter one in the field. They typically remain in Hueco Mundo, something that the rest of us should be very grateful for. Hueco Mundo, said Itachi, is that their home? Kensai nodded. It's a dimension that exists between the Soul Society and the realms of the living. Hollows are able to travel freely between worlds thanks to their ability to create spiritual pathways called Garganta. Unfortunately, the only way to get to Hueco Mundo is through a Garganta, something the Soul Society has never been able to replicate. So let me get this straight, said Jiraiya. Hollows can pop up in any world they want, snack on some human souls, and then run right back home without anyone being able to chase them. Man, that's just not fair. No kidding, groaned Yoruichi. It's actually possible for Soul Reapers to go after them if they're able to make it through the Garganta before it closes, but only a few have ever managed to pull it off. And none of them have ever returned to tell the tale. As far as Hueco Mundo goes, we're unfortunately flying blind. That's a major disadvantage, said Itachi as his brow furrowed in thought, especially if the same is not true for the hollows. The ones that we encountered the night before seem to be little more than primal beasts, but if what you say about these Ejukas is true, then it is entirely possible that they've conducted advanced reconnaissance of the Soul Society. That's a potentially staggering information gap. Jashiro smiled. I think you're overreacting, Itachi. It is true that Ejukas are much more clever than other hollows, but from what we've seen in the field their intellectual prowess is merely on the tactical level. They are strong enough and smart enough to command Jillians as foot soldiers, but aspects of long-term strategy such as detailed intelligence work and analysis is beyond them. Jashiro's right, said Shunsui. Above all, Ejukas are driven by the same urge as other hollows, the desire to feed. In addition to them attacking lesser hollows, we've also spotted them on rare occasions trying to devour one of their fellow Ejukas. They may possess the capacity to cooperate for short-term gains, but their predatory and cannibalistic natures make them incapable of acting strategically. With all due respect, Captain, Lisa protested, that strikes me as an idea based more in wishful thinking and circumstantial evidence than anything else. Anecdotes and the occasional field report aren't enough for us to make conclusive statements on the nature of the higher orders of Manos Grande. I'm with Itachi on this matter. The idea that the hollows have far more information on us than we do of them is an alarming prospect, especially if they prove capable of effectively organizing to take advantage of it. Shunsui winked at Itachi. Well, it seems you already have a fan in my lieutenant, Itachi. I bet you're pretty popular with the ladies in general, aren't you? Well, he's definitely not lacking in the looks department, said Yoruichi with a playful smirk. I caught more than a few of the female applicants eyeing him during the exams, and I can't say I blame him. He is pretty cute, chirped Mashiro. That he is, said Kiryu with a grin. I think I could find a place for him in my division once he graduates. Jiraiya chuckled. Well, that's typical. My appreciation of Itachi is based on the intelligence he has displayed here, said Lisa, although Itachi was keenly aware of her looking him over from head to toe, although I am not above admiring his physical qualities. I am a curious woman with healthy interests, after all. Shunsui smiled. That you are, Lisa. We're getting sidetracked, said Itachi, quite eager to steer the conversation back towards its original course. Lieutenant Yadomaru, a few seconds ago you mentioned higher orders of Manos Grande. Are you implying that there is another classification that goes beyond that of Ajukas? Lisa nodded. Yes, although evidence for their existence at this point beyond anecdotal reports is rather slim. Still, they cannot simply be dismissed out of hand. Indeed, said Kiryu somberly, not when the potential threat they could pose if conclusively proven to be real is so grave. Itachi saw Jiraiya's eyes narrow. So what is it? What's out there that could be worse than an Ajukas? The Vasto Lords, Shinji answered. There have supposedly been a few sightings of them, but those reports came from survivors of teams that were almost entirely wiped out, and the witnesses were so badly shaken that it was almost impossible to get solid information out of them. Love sighed. If the ravings of a few badly wounded and severely traumatized Soul Reapers are to be believed, these Manos Grande are about the size of normal humans. However, supposedly they're both smarter and far more powerful than those of the Ajuka's rank. How much more powerful? Asked Itachi, his gut telling him that he wouldn't like the answer. Kensai scowled. If the fear-mongers are correct, their strength surpasses that of a Soul Reaper captain. Itachi was floored. From what he and Jiraiya had witnessed the night before, the barest glimpses of Yoruichi and Unohana's abilities had indicated that the powers of Soul Reaper captains were in a league of their own. Was there truly a level of hollow out there capable of surpassing that? Jiraiya shook his head. Well, shit. Itachi nodded after a moment. Yes, I suppose that's as good a way to put it as any. Shunsui raised his hands. Now, there's no need to panic. Sightings of these things have been extremely rare. From what we can tell, if they do exist they hardly ever leave Hueco Mundo. Jashiro gave what Itachi guessed was supposed to be a reassuring smile. Let me put it this way, you have a far greater chance of being struck by lightning than encountering a Vasto Lord. Besides, as captains aren't exactly pushovers. A Vasto Lord may sound like a truly daunting foe, but no enemy is invincible. Yoruichi nodded. True, but that being said, if they do exist then they should be handled with extreme caution. I actually spoke to the head captain about them a while back, and he was thinking of issuing a decree regarding them. Any sighting of a Vasto Lord is to be reported directly to him, and they are not to be engaged until at least 2 captains and their lieutenants have arrived on the scene. Lisa raised an eyebrow. The head captain actually said that. First I've heard of it, said Shinji. Love's eyes narrowed. Something like this should have come up at the last captain's meeting. He's right, said Kensai. If this is true, then why has it been kept from us, Yoruichi? Because it was an informal conversation that I had with him, Yoruichi replied. If the head captain decides to make it official policy, he'll announce it accordingly. Lisa shuddered. I hope the likes of the Vasto Lords remain in Hueco Mundo. Fighting one of those does not sound fun. Now, Lisa, there's no need worry, said Shunsui as he patted his lieutenant on the back. If we have to go up against one, you can just leave the heavy lifting to me. Lisa scowled. With all due respect, Captain, as your lieutenant I will do my duty in battle no matter what the nature of our opponent may be. I will not allow you to take on a powerful enemy by yourself out of some misguided sense of chivalry. Shunsui chuckled. As feisty as ever. There's just no arguing with you when you get like this. I wanna fight one, chirped Mashiro. Kensai, we can take one, right? Kensai glared at his lieutenant. Mashiro, were you not paying attention to the others at all? We should hope that we never have to face one of these Vasto Lords at all. We shouldn't be worrying about the likes of them anyway right now, said Kiryu as she smiled at Itachi and Jiraiya. After all, wasn't the reason we all came here today was to review test results and scout potential recruits? I'd say that we're not doing a very good job if the 2 most talented applicants in the pool are right here in front of us and we're talking about something else. Jashiro nodded. You're quite right about that. Itachi, Jiraiya, if you don't mind me asking, where did you acquire your hand-to-hand combat skills? To be able to go up against a hollow without proper Soul Reaper training is no small feat. You haven't been in the Soul Society very long, right? Asked Shinji. I doubt you would have had much of a chance to train here. That's correct, said Itachi. The skills you refer to were ones we both had when we were alive, although we never had the opportunity to use them against hollows until last night. Jiraiya chuckled. We didn't even know that hollows existed until we got here. Maybe we were good fighters when we were still alive, but after watching Captains Yoruichi and Hana last night it's clear that we both have a lot to learn. True, said Shinji with a smile, but the fact that you recognize that means you're off to a good start, you're not overconfident. If you manage to maintain a sense of perspective then I think the two of you'll do just fine in the academy. Love nodded. If your skills are already sharp enough to defeat a hollow in unarmed combat, then if nothing else the two of you should ace your Hakuda classes. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Hakuda. The hand-to-hand fighting arts utilized by Soul Reapers, Kensai answered for him, were taught to fight with more than just our Zanpakuto, after all. Now it was Jiraiya's turn to voice the pair's confusion. Zanpakuto. Mashiro's eyes widened. What, you two don't even know what a Zanpakuto is? Mashiro, be nice, Lisa gently chided her. Remember, they said they only arrived in the Soul Society a few weeks ago. There's still a lot they have to catch up on. Mashiro nodded and smiled at Itachi and Jiraiya. Right, I forgot about that. Sorry. To answer your question, said Yoruichi, a Zanpakuto is a Soul Reaper's sword. They're our signature weapons, and only one trained in the Soul Reaper arts can properly wield them. Your instructors at the academy will go over them in greater detail, but for now just know that they're not normal swords by any stretch of the imagination. Itachi nodded. Very well, then, thank you. Yeah, said Jiraiya, it's nice to have a little bit cleared up, at least. Yoruichi smiled. Your instructors should cover this on the first day, but I don't see any harm in giving you two a running start. There are 4 different styles of combat that Soul Reapers can practice. We've already covered Hakuda. Zanjutsu is the art of fighting with a Zanpakuto. As you might imagine, traditional swordplay is a major part of Zanjutsu training, but the unique nature of the Zanpakuto means that there's more to it than conventional fencing. You'll see what I'm talking about once your classes start. What are the other 2 arts? Asked Itachi. One's called Kido, Yoruichi replied. You two got a taste of it in the second phase of the exams. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. The last leg of the pillar run. That was those balls of energy the people on the shore were shooting at us, right? Shunsui chuckled. I still can't believe Tessai let you drag him and his subordinates into phase 2 like that. You really are a devious woman, Yoruichi. Yoruichi grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Jashiro smirked. You are correct, Jiraiya. Kido, also known as the demon arts, is a form of combat that involves using spirit energy to cast spells. The people that were firing those blasts of energy at you and Itachi during the pillar run were members of the Kido Corps, a branch of the Soul Society's military that specializes in spell casting as their primary method of combat. Tessai's the head of the Kido Corps, said Yoruichi. You saw him during phase 2, he was the guy with the fancy blue robe. Lisa's eyes widened. You had the Grand Kido Chief personally involved with the academy entrance exams. I've never heard of him doing something like that before. How'd you talk him into it? Asked Mashiro. Tessai's an old friend, Yoruichi replied. Him, Kazuki and I all go way back. Who's Kazuki? Asked Itachi, scanning the room in case he'd missed someone earlier. He's the 3rd seat of my division, said Yoruichi. Kazuki Urahara's in charge of the detention unit, but he also likes to tinker and has all sorts of research projects that he's conducting on the side. Those trick pens from the first phase of the exams were made by him. Jiraiya smirked. Sounds like an interesting guy. Yoruichi nodded. That's certainly one way to put it. I'd say he's one of the smartest guys in the Soul Society, and he's always coming up with some crazy new invention. He's pretty friendly once you get to know him, but he can definitely come across as a bit of an oddball at first. Life's never dull with him around, that's for sure. Itachi leaned forward. You said he's the head of the detention unit, right? Would I be correct in assuming that's some sort of prison detail? Yoruichi nodded. Yup. Basically, the detention unit's in charge of the imprisonment and supervision of all criminals in the Soul Society. It's under Squad 2's umbrella, which means I'm supposed to be the boss, but I like to let Kazuki run things on his own. He knows what he's doing and doesn't need me micromanaging him. Mastery of both Hakuda and Ho-Ho are required for anyone working in the detention unit, and Kazuki's got both of those nailed down. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Ho-Ho, would that be the 4th style of Soul Reaper combat? Yes, said Lisa, it's a defensive style based on footwork. The key elements of it are speed and agility. The signature Ho-Ho technique is Shunpo, said Jashiro. The user moves so fast that their movements aren't even perceptible to those of untrained beings. It's commonly referred to as the flash step. Itachi's eyes widened in comprehension as he turned to Yoruichi. That's what you did during phase 1, wasn't it? Yoruichi smiled. You got it. Shunsui chuckled. I still can't believe there was applicant dumb enough to pick a fight with the Flash Goddess. Flash Goddess, Itachi repeated in confusion. Shinji smirked. Yoruichi's the best Shunpo practitioner in the entire Soul Society. She can make flash steps as casually as you and I might walk through a park. Don't forget she's also the fastest, chirped Mashiro. Ah, you guys are way too nice to me, said Yoruichi with a laugh. Even with her faux protest, there was an unmistakable hint pride in her voice, and it wasn't hard for Itachi to see why. Her movements both during the exams and the fight the night before had been nothing short of outstanding. Flash Goddess truly was an appropriate title for her. Ho-Ho by itself isn't enough to win a fight, said Kensai, that's why users combine it with either Hakuda or Zanjutsu. You'll get the full rundown soon enough, Love added, it should be interesting to see how quickly you two take to it. Yoruichi had a cat-like grin on her face as she regarded Itachi and Jiraiya. If what I saw last night and during Phase 2 today is any indicator, I think you guys are gonna be naturals at both Hakuda and Ho-Ho. Squad 2 would be a natural home for you once you graduate. Jashiro smirked. Looks like someone's a little eager with her recruitment pitch. Come on, Yoruichi, said Kiryu with a smile, you can't hog the best applicants to yourself. They've both shown themselves to be rather intelligent, so I think Squad 12 would be a suitable division for them. What do you two say? Don't listen to her, said Shinji, she'll have the two of you waste your time maintaining the archives. Kiryu folded her arms. That's not true, Shinji. I already have plenty of good hands managing the library. I think Itachi and Jiraiya would be best suited to my field study teams. Love shook his head. Field study, for two men capable of taking down a hollow barehanded with no training whatsoever. No way, Kiryu, these two are frontline fighters. If you guys want to go somewhere that'll let you put your talents to good use, Squad 7's right up your alley. Not so fast, said Kensai as he regarded Itachi and Jiraiya. If you two had the guts to take on a hollow without the education of a Soul Reaper, then you'll be that much more formidable once you've graduated from the academy. I can already tell that you two are the types who'll keep pushing themselves even after graduation. You should consider Squad 9. I'll drive you too hard, but you'll thank me once you've unlocked your true potential. Mashiro smiled. We're also in charge of the Seraite News magazine. We're always looking for new editors and columnists, so if either of you have any writing talent you should join up with us. Jiraiya grinned. Well, I was a novelist on the side while I was still alive. Never tried my hand at journalism before, but there's a first time for everything. I might just take you up on that. A novelist, said Shunsui. I like a good book now and then. What was your genre? Romance and comedy, he replied. Life is meant for love and laughter, after all, and there's no reason why the afterlife can't be the same way. Shunsui had a good chuckle at that. An argument I've made myself on more than one occasion. As long as we're all making recruitment pitches, I think you'd do all right in Squad 8. Normally I only extend such offers to women, but I'm willing to make an exception here. Jiraiya's face lit up. Wait a minute, are you saying that, aside from you, your division is made up entirely of women? Count me in. Lisa groaned. Don't be ridiculous, we accept both male and female recruits. This is one of the 13 court guard squads, not my captain's personal harem, no matter how much he tries to make it one. Shunsui laughed. Now, Lisa, don't go scaring away a potential recruit. It's bad for the squad. Please take no offense, Jiraiya, said Lisa, but I can already tell that you'd be no different from my captain here, and I can only handle one of him in Squad 8. Itachi, on the other hand, would be a most welcome addition to our ranks. Jiraiya sighed, but Itachi could still see an amused light in his eyes. Some guys really do get all the luck. Captain Hirako, I'm rather surprised at your sudden silence, said Jashiro. Aren't you going to make a pitch for them to join Squad 5? I'd rather wait for them to graduate from the academy first, Shinji replied. Don't get me wrong. You two had by far the most impressive exam results out of all the candidates, so it's clear that you've got a lot of potential. I just prefer to wait and see how students do at the academy before making a recruitment pitch. The curriculum does a good job at illuminating the strengths and weaknesses of a potential Soul Reaper. Once I've had a chance to review your final test scores, I might just pay you a friendly visit before the graduation ceremony. Jashiro nodded. A reasonable approach. That's usually mine as well, although I'm more than willing to scout the field, as it were. For what it's worth, I think you two will do very well at the academy. When the time for graduation draws near, do keep Squad 13 in mind as a potential first assignment. We're always on the lookout for talented individuals, and I believe that every person has something special to offer to the division. That's a very open-minded approach to recruitment, said Itachi. Jiraiya looked around. Well, if nothing else, it seems like we'll have plenty of options for when we graduate. How come the other captains aren't here? They've either got duties to attend to or just weren't interested, said Yoruichi. It's always a different batch of captains each year that gather to review the entrance exam scores. Don't worry, once you two graduate, you'll meet the rest in due time. Do not become overconfident, advised Lisa. You may have performed well in the entrance exams, but the academy is not to be taken lightly. Expect a rigorous curriculum. Oh, they'll be just fine, said Kiryu, throwing a friendly wink at Itachi, and once they're done, it's straight to Squad 12 with them. At the very least, I'd like to see you join our ranks, Itachi. I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken, said Love with a smirk. They're both clearly meant for Squad 7. No, Squad 9 calls dibs, chirped Mashiro. That's rather premature, Lisa asserted. Jiraiya's an open question, but I would contend that Itachi should come to Squad 8 upon graduation. Yoruichi laughed. I knew you two would be popular. Jiraiya, don't take this the wrong way, but they can fight over you to their heart's content. However, before Itachi knew what was happening, Yoruichi leaned towards him. There was a playful, almost feline, look in her eyes, and a moment later she licked him on the cheek. None of them are getting you, Itachi, she said with a cat-like grin. I'm marking my territory here and now, you're mine. It wasn't in Itachi's nature to blush, but he could feel a slight warmth coming to his just the same. Just how exactly was he supposed to respond to something like that? Yoruichi chuckled, and the mischievous look in her eyes told Itachi that she had a pretty good idea regarding his current state of mind. What's the matter, Itachi? Cat got your tongue. He was vaguely aware of the smirk on Jiraiya's face. I'd say that's a pretty good way to put it. No fair. Kiryu pouted. Yoruichi, that's cheating. Yoruichi folded her arms and smiled. Hey, we never laid down any ground rules for claiming recruits, right? I'd say it's fair game. Then if I lick him, that means he'll have to join Squad 9. Cheered Mashiro. Come here, Itachi. Kensai bopped her on the head. Mashiro, cut it out. That's now how a lieutenant is supposed to behave. But Captain Shihoin did it. Mashiro protested. She's a captain, Kensai countered. She has greater leeway, even if some of her behavior doesn't necessarily set the best example. Yoruichi laughed. Oh, lighten up, Kensai. Let her have a little fun. Kensai folded his arms. No offense, Captain Shihoin, but I don't need you rubbing off on my lieutenant. If she falls under your influence, then the next thing I know she'll be flash stepping out of her clothes. Itachi raised an eyebrow as he turned to Yoruichi. Wait, do you actually do that? Yoruichi gave him a playful smirk. Want to find out? Yes, please, cheered Jiraiya. I don't think that's necessary, said Itachi, unused to feeling quite so flustered. Jashiro chuckled. I'm with Itachi here, Captain Shihoin, as are the others I would imagine. Now, said Shunsui, holding up a hand, let's not be so hasty here. It's just starting to get fun. His lieutenant whacked him on the back of the head. With all due respect, Captain, keep it in your pants. Shunsui laughed as he rubbed the spot where Lisa had hit him. All right. I guess a captain stripping down in the middle of an academy conference room wouldn't be very professional. We'll have to save the exhibition for another time, Captain Shihoin. That's too bad, said Yoruichi, winking at Itachi. I was ready to put on a show. Oh, well. Shinji smirked. There's never a dull moment when you're around, is there? Yoruichi shrugged. Well, me or Kazuki, really. Without the two of us, Squad 2 would be a lot less interesting. Especially if that lieutenant of yours was running the show, said Love. What was his name again? You know, the guy that's got his head shoved up his ass because of how rich his family is. Omaeda, I think, said Kensai. Muranoshin Omaeda. Seriously, how did he wind up becoming your lieutenant, Captain Shihoin? I know he's achieved Shikai, but he's not exactly talented with it. No offense. None taken, Yoruichi replied. To tell you the truth, taking him on as Squad 2's lieutenant wasn't exactly my choice. Sure, he met the requirements, but I had other potential candidates who weren't nearly as condescending towards others as he is. Do you not have the freedom to promote your own subordinates? Asked Itachi. Yoruichi shook her head. Normally I do, but this was a different set of circumstances. You two already know that I'm not just a captain, I'm also part of the Soul Society's nobility. The Omeda family isn't anywhere near as powerful as mine, but they're still quite wealthy and thus are inevitably part of the games that the noble houses like to play with each other. Long story short, he's my lieutenant because of Soul Society aristocratic politics, and I can't get rid of him at will, partly because of those politics but also because he possesses at least enough competence to do his job without requiring constant supervision. It's not an ideal situation, but it's one that I've learned to work around. You mentioned that he's achieved Shikai, said Jiraiya. What's that? Something you'll learn about at the academy soon enough, Yoruichi replied before standing up. Speaking of which, I really ought to get you two over to the student dorms now. It's tradition for a party to be thrown for the candidates that make it through the entrance exams, and it would look strange if the two top-performing applicants weren't there. So as fun as this has been, I'm afraid we need to get going. That's a shame, said Jiraiya. I was really enjoying myself here. Ah, well, if there's a party to be had, I'm not about to turn it down. It was nice to meet all of you, said Itachi as he and Jiraiya joined Yoruichi. Jashiro smiled. Likewise. Best of luck with your time in the academy. Enjoy yourselves, said Shunsui with a grin. The academy doesn't have to be all learning and no fun, after all. My student days certainly had their share of adventures. Jashiro chuckled. That's putting it mildly. Captain, stop setting a poor example for the new students. Lisa scolded before turning back to Itachi and Jiraiya. Please take your studies seriously. The better your grades, the better your chances of gaining a seated officer's position when you graduate from the academy. Study hard, said Kensai. I'm looking forward to seeing what the academy will turn you into. Don't forget to subscribe to the Seraite News magazine, chirped Mashiro. Students get a discount, and the fees can be subtracted automatically from your academy spending accounts, so you won't have to worry about forgetting payments. Shinji gave them a wave. Have fun in class. Don't goof off too much. Love smiled. Show everyone what you can do. Hit the books and keep your grades up, cried Kiryu. I'm expecting great things, especially from you, Itachi. Catch you all later, said Yoruichi as the door shut behind them. Come on, let's get you two settled in. Itachi nodded as they set off towards the student dorms. Thank you for introducing us to them. It was a very informative experience. Jiraiya smiled. I'll say, you Soul Reapers sure are an interesting bunch. Yoruichi laughed. Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it. Keep an eye out for the other captains and lieutenants while you're at the academy. Eventually most of the higher-ups will pay the school a visit at least once during your time there. Some hold guest lectures while others just observe students and try to find potential recruits. Does that include the head captain? Asked Itachi. Yoruichi nodded. Occasionally, yes. Normally he just gives the big speech on the first day of the new school year, and he'll also address the year's graduating class as well, but every now and then he'll make an appearance that isn't ceremonial. 9 times out of 10 it'll be during one of the history lecture halls. The head captain's by far the oldest Soul Reaper on active duty, so a lot of the events you'll read about will personally involve him. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Really? Just how old is he? Yoruichi's brow furrowed. Hard to say. He's been around since the founding of the 13 court guard squads, so the bare minimum would be over 2,000 years. I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to 3 or 4,000, but that's just my take on it. Itachi's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely, Yoruichi replied. He's the most powerful Soul Reaper in all existence. He hasn't lived so long in such a dangerous line of work by being a pushover, after all. Age hasn't slowed him down a bit, either. They say that at full strength he's a match for every other captain and lieutenant in the 13 court guard squads combined, and I'm inclined to believe that. You don't mess with the head captain if you want to live, take my word on that. Itachi nodded. I see. He's not thinking of retiring anytime soon. Asked Jiraiya. 2,000 years is a long time to be on the job. Yoruichi shrugged. He doesn't seem to mind it. From what I can tell, I don't think he'd ever consider doing anything other than what he is right now. The head captain will serve until he dies, and may it be a long time yet before that day comes. Despite her casual attitude, Itachi could tell that her respect for the head captain was genuine. As swift and powerful as she was still deferential to him, which made Itachi quite curious as to what the man was like. He supposed that he would find out one way or another in due time. After leaving the main building and walking through a broad courtyard, they came to the student dorms. There were several small groups of people in front of the building, mostly consisting of students or faculty. Here we are, said Yoruichi. If you head inside, just to the right after the front entrance is the student help desk. Tell the secretary your names and she'll tell you where your rooms are. There should already be some basic school supplies inside them, and you'll get more come orientation tomorrow. It's been a while since I've been here, but if I recall correctly the first-year students are concentrated on the second floor. There should be a common room in the middle, that's where the student parties are held. Thank you for everything, Captain Shihoin, said Itachi, bowing his head. We wouldn't be here today if it was not for you. Jiraiya bowed as well. He's right. Thanks for all your help, Captain Shihoin. Yoruichi smiled. Hey, now, what did I tell you guys earlier? There's no need to get all formal with me. If you have to, call me Captain Yoruichi. Otherwise, Yoruichi works just fine. Itachi couldn't help but give her a small smile in return. In that case, thank you, Yoruichi. Jiraiya smiled as well. We owe you one. Yoruichi folded her arms. If you want to pay me back, then you can do so by showing the instructors here what you're really made of. The hollow encounter last night and your exam results today are all I need to know that you two are something special, but the teachers here are another story. There'll be plenty of fun in your student days, and I definitely want you two to enjoy yourselves, but don't forget that this is first and foremost a school. Study and train hard, because by the time graduation rolls around I want to be able to make you two seated officers right out of the gate. You've definitely got the potential for it. I appreciate the confidence you have in us, said Itachi. You've earned it so far, said Yoruichi, but the real work starts here. I've got no doubt that they'll put the two of you in the advanced track based on your test scores, which means you'll have twice as much work as the other students. Hit the books as hard as you hit that hollow the night before, and your classmates will run out of breath trying to keep up with you. Jiraiya chuckled. Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us. Should be fun. I give you my word that your faith in us will not be misplaced, said Itachi. Yoruichi grinned. Good. Well, it's getting late, and I need to get back to Squad 2. I'll see you two around. She turned to leave, but she had only gone a few steps before looking over her shoulder. Oh, and Itachi. Yes, he said. She gave him a wink. If any of the other captains swing by, do me a favor and don't let them sweet-talk you. Come graduation, you're mine. I'll try to remember that, said Itachi, once again unused to being so flustered. Glad to hear it, she said as she waved. Catch you later. Jiraiya smirked at him as Yoruichi went on her way. You Uchiha, your clan's just a bunch of natural-born lady killers. Itachi doubted that he'd meant his words as a barb, but they cut deep all the same. Even after all the time that had passed since the Uchiha clan massacre, the wounds on his psyche were rawer than he let on. You have no idea, he said after a moment, his tone grim. Jiraiya studied him carefully for a moment before speaking again. Well, then, shall we go settle in? If they're hosting a party up there, it'd be a shame to miss it. Parties aren't really my thing, Itachi replied, but I suppose it would look odd if I wasn't in attendance. An obligatory appearance will do, and then you and I have some business to attend to. Jiraiya nodded, his eyes narrowing. That we do. For all of Itachi's misgivings, the first-year student party had actually been a rather relaxing affair. By the time he and Jiraiya had arrived, food and drinks had already been set out and people were digging in. It had taken a few moments for everyone to realize that the two top candidates of the entrance exams had arrived, but once the word was out, Itachi and Jiraiya had been pulled into the center of the festivities. Itachi had felt more than a little awkward at first. Life on the run as a rogue ninja and member of the Akatsuki hadn't exactly improved his social skills, after all. However, his fellow students seemed to be a friendly and pleasant group overall, and they appeared to catch on rather quickly to the fact that he wasn't exactly a party person. It hadn't taken Jiraiya long at all to establish himself as the jokester and overall life of the party. From what Itachi could see, it appeared to be a role that the sage had slipped into quite easily. While the Sannin held court with lewd jests and tales of a rather seedy nature, Itachi was able to quietly settle in a little off to the side and field questions from the mainly female students that wished to chat with him. He remained guarded and refrained from telling them anything regarding his past life, but he was still able to politely engage his fellow students in small talk and openly ponder with them just what exactly lay in store for them come orientation and the first day of class. I don't think I ever experienced anything quite like this back when I was alive, he mused. I graduated from the Shinobi Academy so quickly due to my advanced abilities that student life passed as a blur. My talents set me apart and got me noticed, but I wound up nearly isolated. Were it not for Shisui and Izumi, I could very well have not made any real friends at all. As fun as the party wound up being, Itachi was keenly aware of Jiraiya subtly studying him the whole time. After what he deemed an appropriate amount of time had passed, Itachi excused himself and went to his room. A few minutes later there was a knock at the door, and Itachi knew who it was. "Go ahead," he said. Jiraiya opened the door. "So, are we having it out here?" Itachi shook his head as he grabbed several sheets of paper and a writing board. "No, we'll go to the courtyard. At this hour, there shouldn't be many people there." Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. "All right, but what's with the paper? This isn't exactly a study session." "Trust me," said Itachi as he stood up, "you'll thank me for bringing it soon enough." It wasn't hard for the two former shinobi to slip out of the dorms undetected. After they found a quiet corner of the courtyard and sat down, Itachi pulled a familiar object from his pocket and passed it to Jiraiya. The Sanin's eyes widened as he saw what it was. "One of the pens from the first phase of the exams," he said softly as he studied it before giving Itachi a smirk. Well. You know how to plan ahead." Itachi nodded as Jiraiya returned the pen. "Once I was able to comprehend the true nature of the writing utensils we had been given for the test, I realized that they might be able to serve a purpose beyond the entrance exams. If Yoruichi is right, once we learn to properly control our spiritual pressure, these special pens will become useful only for writing, but since we have yet to reach that point, I can apply them as an enforcement mechanism for my testimony." Jiraiya folded his arms. "So, do you intend to write an essay with me watching your every move, then?" "I'd call it more of a pop quiz, but some of the answers I'll provide may well be lengthy enough to be considered essays," said Itachi. "Ask me whatever you wish. If we run out of paper, I'll simply have to grab more. We both already know what will happen if I try to lie. Is this arrangement acceptable to you?" Jiraiya nodded. "Sounds good to me. Let's get started." "I'll be damned," thought Jiraiya as he read all of Itachi's answers. I was sure at least one of my questions would get him, but there wasn't so much as a spark. So, it's all here, then. He would give credit where it was due. Itachi had been quite thorough with his answers. Several of them really had turned into essays, and in fact the young man had needed 2 breaks to grab more paper to write on. Jiraiya was sure that it was well past midnight now, but he wasn't the least bit tired. Quite the opposite. In fact, with all that he had learned tonight, he knew it would be quite some time before sleep found him again. His brow furrowed as he contemplated the testimony before him. The Uchiha clan's downfall, Itachi's role in the Akatsuki, the real reason behind his reappearance in the village hidden in the leaves, and all the information he had gathered regarding the organization and its hunt for the tailed beasts. All that and more was staring him right in the face. It was hard for him to find words for it all, or even just for a starting point, but he took a shot at it just the same. "So, Danzo, huh?" Itachi nodded. "Yes, although that does not excuse the part one played. It was all sanctioned, then," said Jiraiya as he scanned the written answers. "Danzo, the village elders. And even the third Hokage." Itachi shook his head. "Not quite. The third Hokage only became aware of the true nature of my actions after the clan was murdered. He had still been pursuing a policy of negotiation and reconciliation, a course that Shisui and I had desired as well. Danzo's ultimatum came without the third Hokage's consent or knowledge, although Lord Sarutobi gave retroactive approval after I reported to him." Jiraiya sighed. After all that Itachi had told him, he had a good understanding of the position his late master had been forced into. It did not diminish his faith and pride in his teacher, but that did not change the fact that Jiraiya wished his old mentor could have found another way to handle the situation. At least Danzo was formally stripped of his authority afterwards, he mused, although given how cagey the bastard was, I doubt that was too much of an obstacle for him. I hope Tsunade can keep him in check. "So, you made your report and struck your pact with him," said Jiraiya, and then threatened Danzo for good measure. "After that, well, it's all here, but I suppose I'll need a little more time to go over it all. And let it sink in." "I would expect nothing less," Itachi replied, "and while I would not presume to rush you, I do need an answer." Jiraiya gave him a hard stare. "You mean a judgment?" "My judgment." Itachi nodded. "Yes, I chose death in battle against Sasuke because I felt he was the only one worthy of avenging our family and punishing me for the sins I committed. Suffice to say that when I pictured the afterlife I was in for, the Soul Society was not what I had in mind. For reasons beyond my comprehension, I've been spared the flames of hell. So, since the afterlife has not seen fit to punish you, I'm supposed to mete out a sentence instead?" asked Jiraiya. "You yourself stated that you wanted to judge whether or not I was a threat to the other students at this school before I took my place in class with them," said Itachi. You know quite well what I was capable of in life, and while in death I have lost a great deal of my former powers, the abilities that I have kept are still enough to make me dangerous. The same goes for you. In fact, if you and I were to fight right here and now, I believe you would win. Jiraiya folded his arms. And is that what you want? You already met your death in battle against your younger brother. Are you so eager to end your afterlife at my hands? Itachi sighed. No, although I do not believe that I deserve redemption, I would nonetheless like to join the ranks of the Soul Reapers and do what I can to protect those who have already passed beyond death's door. I will not pretend that this may grant me absolution. What I have done is beyond atonement. However, if I do have the power in the afterlife to defend others and act in a manner that would truly be appropriate for a shinobi of the village hidden in the leaves, then I would like the chance to do so. That being said, your mistrust in me is more than warranted given my past actions. If you believe that I would be a threat rather than a protector, then let's have it out here and now. After a good, long moment of consideration, Jiraiya shook his head. No, I will not fight you. As for the judgment you seek, I don't think it's mine to give quite yet. What do you mean? Asked Itachi. What I mean is that the situation is far more complex than I had originally realized, Jiraiya answered. I don't necessarily condone your actions, but with all that's been revealed I would be wrong to simply condemn them out of hand either. I think it's clear that you got caught up in events that were beyond your control. You were handed some nasty choices, and the situation was far from black and white. Even taking your testimony in its entirety does not mean that I can come to a final verdict right away. It'll take some time for me to come to an appropriate conclusion. I'll have to give it a great deal of thought before I get back to you on it. Itachi nodded. I understand. I'm not finished yet, said Jiraiya. Regarding the other students, at this point I am confident in that you don't pose a threat to them. Whether or not that will continue to be the case as your powers develop remains to be seen. That's why I'm going to continue to monitor you as we go through our training together. I would expect nothing less, Itachi replied. Jiraiya smiled as he stood up. In that case, I think we'd better head back inside. I'm all for staying up late and partying, but we do have orientation tomorrow. It'd be a shame to sleep through it, don't you think? He was surprised to see Itachi smirk as he rose to join him. I suppose you're right. To think that we'll be students again after gaining such mastery of our crafts when we were still alive. Is it strange that I'm actually looking forward to it? Jiraiya laughed. Not at all. To tell you the truth, so am I, don't get me wrong. I'll hit the books, but there's no rule saying I can't do that and cause a little trouble at the same time. It'll also be a great opportunity to start research for my new novel series, especially since the student dorms are co-ed. Itachi shook his head. You're fortunate that none of our fellow students seem to be aware of the reputation you had when you were alive. Then again, I suppose there's no reason why the legendary pervert sage can't rise again in the Soul Society. Jiraiya chuckled. Now you sound like Naruto. Pervy sage, was his version of the title. That kid just didn't understand the true nature of my research. Keep telling yourself that, said Itachi. As the two of them headed back inside, Jiraiya could not help but reflect on the strange new circumstances he found himself in. It was one thing to become a student again in order to learn how to harness his new powers. He truly was looking forward to that. It would be another thing entirely to be attending class alongside a man who had been known as one of the most notorious mass murderers in the history of the Hidden Leaf Village. At any other time Jiraiya would have dismissed such a possibility as completely outrageous, but after learning what he had tonight his thoughts on the matter were now much more complex. Whether or not atonement for what he did in life is possible at this point is a question that I can't answer, he thought, but if he truly is determined to seize the second chance that the Soul Society has given him, then it's not my place to deny it to him. It would seem that he truly wants to take this opportunity to reform himself, or at least serve in a manner that was denied to him while he was alive. That's more than I ever got out of Orochimaru. For now, all I can do is watch and wait. And so, starting tomorrow, my watch begins. A few months later. So, is this the right answer? Asked a rather busty red-haired girl named Julia. Leaning over the table, Itachi checked his classmates' work before nodding. Yes, that's it, excellent work. Julia smiled. Oh, thank you. The only reason I got it was because you helped me earlier, though. You're the best, Itachi. Itachi, chirped the slender raven-haired girl next to Julia, who if Itachi recalled correctly was called Misako. Can you check mine now, please? No, he needs to check mine, cried an athletic blonde named Maria. No, mine, protested a lithe brunette named Anya. How did I get to be so popular? He mused, I didn't ask these girls to study with me, yet here they are all the same. Here, in this case was the main student library of Shino Academy. Itachi had developed a habit of coming here after his daily classes to do his required readings and written homework because it was so much more spacious and comfortable than his tiny room at the dorms. He loved the place. The various books and scrolls were so neatly organized, and there was so much material to choose from. It was also much quieter than the dorms, although that was subject to change whenever his female classmates found him. Which was becoming more and more common as of late. Calm down, he said, this is a library, not the common room at the dorm. I'll check all of your answers, I promise. Reviewing their papers, he found their work to be satisfactory. It really wasn't surprising. They were all in the advanced track with him and Jiraiya, so their wits were plenty sharp. In fact, Itachi had come to suspect that none of them really needed his help with their homework at all. They were just looking for an excuse to spend time with him. True to his word, he had worked hard from day one to excel in his classes and thereby validate the faith that Yoruichi had shown in him. It hadn't taken long at all for his efforts to become noticed by both his instructors and his fellow classmates, and before Itachi knew it his name was at the top of the first-year student charts. He hadn't been looking to make a name for himself as a star pupil, but he had inadvertently done so just the same. With the diligence and drive that he brought to his studies, his rise had been swift, and Itachi wasn't about to stop pushing himself now. I've learned so much in just a few short months, he thought, I truly have taken my first steps into a larger world. The first official day of the new school year alone had been an eye-opening experience. Just like Yoruichi had told him, none other than head captain Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto had given the keynote speech at the opening ceremony. It was an address that Itachi would not forget anytime soon. Never had he witnessed a man of such age that spoke with such gravitas. The head captain had by no means been flaunting his power, but even Itachi, untrained as he was in the arts of detecting and controlling spirit energy, could tell that the bald, heavily scarred and long-bearded man possessed strength beyond comprehension. No cage that Itachi had ever met could come close to the level of sheer power that he suspected the aged Soul Reaper was suppressing. He imagined that even the mightiest of the Akatsuki would have been hard-pressed to stand against him. As impressive as the head captain and his address to the student body had been, even that took second place in Itachi's mind to the fact that he, Jiraiya, and all the other students were presented with Zanpakuto on their very first day at the academy. From what Itachi understood, the blades that he and his classmates had been given were technically known as itaci. These were nameless Zanpakuto that the students were to train with until their own unique blades awakened, but they were still instructed to treat the itaci as if they were genuine Zanpakuto. What that meant was gradually becoming clear as their classes progressed, but Itachi knew that he still had a long way to go before all his questions concerning the blades of the Soul Reapers would be answered. On the whole, the classes he was taking along with the rest of the students in the advanced track were quite fascinating. The first class of the day was known simply as Spirit Arts, and this was primarily focused on teaching the students to properly harness and control their spirit energy, although it also covered other general Soul Reaper activities such as performing the Kanso, or Soul Burial. After that came a combined course on the geography and the history of the Soul Society and how it interacted with the realms of the living, and Itachi had already proven himself to be the most detailed note-taker in that class. His reasoning was simple. He wanted to learn as much as he could about this new world he found himself in as quickly as possible, and thus he treated the class like a vital intelligence-gathering mission similar what he might have undertaken during his time as a shinobi. Following that was an introductory course on the nature of hollows, and this was another class where Itachi was keen to maintain his diligence and gather as much knowledge as possible about the beasts that he would inevitably wind up facing upon graduation. The other academic classes were rather tame in comparison, focusing on more mundane topics such as writing and mathematics. According to the instructors, courses such as these were meant more to make sure that aspiring Soul Reapers had a good fundamental knowledge base, and that they would gradually be reduced in number and duration as their studies advanced. They weren't held every day, but spaced out across the week so as not to put too much work on them on top of their already intensive combat training. It was in the early afternoon following the lunch break that said combat training began in earnest. The first class focused on Zanjutsu, and that was naturally the one that was the most looked forward to amongst the bulk of the students. Although the course was focused primarily on fighting with the blade, there were also lectures on how to properly bond and meditate with one's Zanpakuto, and these were absolutely vital to awakening one's personal weapon. Following the swordsmanship course came Hakuta training, which was in turn followed by classes in Kido and Hoho. It was in these combat courses that Itachi was truly able to begin applying the shinobi skills of his past life, and the results had rapidly become clear. apart from Jiraiya, none of his fellow students could match him when the time came for sparring bouts. In addition to their core courses, the students of the advanced track had been given the choice of enrolling in elective classes as well. While not required for graduation, the student counselors had noted that having elective courses on their transcripts made graduates more attractive for potential officer positions when the time came to join one of the 13 court guard squads, and certain captains were apparently very keen on particular courses. Itachi's mind had immediately gone to Yoruichi, but it was difficult for him to imagine what sort of elective courses she looked for in candidates for Squad 2. Since it was only his first semester, Itachi had decided to go light on the electives for now and had chosen only one, an advanced civics course that covered the politics of the 13 court guard squads, the Central 46, and the 5 greatest of the noble clans. The student's schedule and pace of education was far more grueling than what Itachi had experienced at the Shinobi Academy. Although classes were only held 5 days a week, the typical school day lasted roughly 9 hours, and there was plenty of material to cover. The weekends were naturally valuable rest days, but even then Itachi refused to let up in his training, allowing himself only a few brief breaks before pressing his nose back to the grindstone. With the manner in which he pushed himself combined with the gifts that his experience as a shinobi provided, out of all the first-year students it was only Jiraiya that could keep pace with Itachi. Even then, it had soon become clear that the legendary Sannin was taking a rather different approach to his education than Itachi was. While the sage got excellent marks, his was a much more relaxed presence in class. He was jovial, boisterous, and even willing to play the fool despite his keen intellect. Most of the time he wasn't outright disruptive, but based on the laughs of the students and the groans of the teachers it was clear that Jiraiya was determined to play the same role as class clown that he had been famous for during his own time at the Shinobi Academy and under the tutelage of the third Hokage. Jiraiya was clearly embracing his return to life as a student and taking as much fun and amusement from it as he could, and Itachi sometimes found himself envying just how carefree the Sannin seemed. Of course, his laid-back attitude did not in the least conceal from Itachi the fact that the sage was still watching him carefully, although none of the other students or teachers seemed to notice. Nor should they, thought Itachi. Jiraiya's an experienced shinobi, covert surveillance is something he's well versed in. So, Itachi, said Maria, do you got any plans for the weekend? Training and studying, he replied. Again, pouted Julia, you always say that, Itachi. Because it's the truth, said Itachi calmly, I still have much to learn, and I want to build up my knowledge and skills as quickly as possible. But you're already at the top of the class, said Misako, you don't need to work all the time. She's right, Itachi, said Anya with a smile, don't you ever take a break? Yes, he said, and what I do in my off time is my business. Well, you should include us in your off time this weekend, said Maria, we found this great tea house not too far from the campus, and we want you to come with us Saturday. Come on, it'll be fun, said Julia with a wink, what do you say, Itachi? Itachi shook his head, I'm sorry, I really do appreciate the invitation, but I'm afraid that I already have plans. Misako sighed, darn it, here I thought we had something that was right up your alley. You can't say no to us forever, Itachi, said Anya with a smirk, sooner or later we'll find something that'll get you to break out of your routine. We'll make sure that you really enjoy yourself. Well, if he's turning you down, I can take his place, said a familiar male voice. Itachi didn't need to turn around to know that Jiraiya was behind him. He had a feeling he knew why the sage was really here, and it wasn't concerning the girls that had ostensibly approached Itachi for help with their studies. It didn't take long for said girls to fall into their normal routine of rejection, starting with Maria. No way, Jiraiya, don't think that we've forgotten about last weekend. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jiraiya protested, although his tone didn't exactly sound innocent. Julia pounced, liar. Do you really expect us to believe that that wasn't you sneaking around the baths? Misako folded her arms, pervert. Now, said Jiraiya as he raised his arms, I can assure you that there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for my actions. If you say, research, again, I swear I'm going to deck you. Anya growled. Itachi sighed, please refrain from that, this is the library, after all. What do you want, Jiraiya? Asked Maria. Jiraiya smiled. Oh, I'm just here for a chat with my pal Itachi. Unless you lovely ladies have something more interesting planned. Not with you, said Julia as she and her friends gathered their belongings, we'll see you around, Itachi. Let us know if you change your mind about Saturday, chirped Misako. You know where to find us, said Anya with a wink. Jiraiya chuckled and sat down as the girls left. Turned them down again, why, from what I can tell, there's not a bad one in the bunch. Itachi rolled his eyes. As I told them, I have plans. It wasn't anything against them. Jiraiya shook his head. I know, but even so, you're starting to worry me. It's good that you've got a solid training regimen going even outside our classes, but all work and no play won't do you any favors. I make time for recreation, Itachi countered as he reached for a particular book. Even I need a chance to rest and unwind, after all. Jiraiya sighed. Look, as a novelist, I've got no beef with you curling up with a book in some quiet corner of the courtyard as a form of relaxation, but seriously, you have got to get a social life, Itachi. I have one, Itachi quipped dryly. It's called you attempting to badger me into joining you on one of your research expeditions, to the ladies' bath, and me sitting back and watching as the girls slap you senseless after they catch you. Truly, I could not ask for better entertainment. Jiraiya laughed. All right, I guess I walked into that one. It's a good thing none of them are as strong as Tsunade, otherwise I'd really be in trouble. Indeed, said Itachi as he flipped a page in his book. Jiraiya smiled. Okay, be honest, if it was Yoruichi extending an invitation to that tea house the girls mentioned earlier, would you say yes? Itachi nodded casually. Of course, I could learn far more from her than the girls from earlier. Jiraiya's smile became a knowing smirk. Oh, really, you'd go along with her purely because she has more to offer from an intellectual standpoint. She's a captain, said Itachi, that alone makes her a fascinating woman. Jiraiya chuckled. Oh, I'm sure. What are you getting at, Jiraiya? Asked Itachi, although in the back of his mind there was the suspicion that he already knew the answer to that. After a moment Jiraiya shook his head. Forget it, if you want to keep fooling yourself, so be it. Good, said Itachi, that means I can get back to the research that the girls interrupted earlier. Jiraiya leaned over to check the book's title, Comprehending the Web of Worlds. You know we already covered that in class, right? We went over it, yes, Itachi replied, but our instructors can only cover so much in a lecture, and there is far more that I seek to learn about these interconnected worlds than what the teachers have to offer. With as little as Itachi knew about the afterlife, every lesson seemed to offer a fresh eye-opener. However, one of the biggest by far had been introduced early on in the semester when they'd sat through their first lecture on what the instructor had referred to as the Web of Worlds. It had completely shattered the conceptions Itachi had previously held regarding the world that he had lived in, and it was his first real glimpse into just how vast the realms of the living truly were. The reason that they were referred to as the realms of the living was simple: there was more than one. Far more than one. Itachi had been stunned to find out that the world he had lived and died in was in fact just one small thread in a truly monumental tapestry. At the very heart of this vast multitude of worlds was the Soul Society, and every other realm of the living was connected to it. Soul Reapers were dispatched across the web of worlds to cleanse them of hollows and guide lost souls to the afterlife, but due to the sheer number of realms involved most received little more than a few token Soul Reaper visits each. In fact, the Shinobi world was actually considered one of the smaller and less important ones. The bulk of the Soul Society's forces were concentrated on a single world whose living population dwarfed that of the Shinobi world and most of the other ones. It had gone a long way towards explaining to Itachi not only why the Rukan district and the Soul Society itself was so vast, but also why he had encountered no one else from the Shinobi world apart from Jiraiya. The odds of such a meeting occurring were incredibly small. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing, he mused. I can't imagine an encounter with a member of my clan going well given what I did to them. Well, said Jiraiya, dragging Itachi out of his thoughts, as long as you're in a reading mood, I was hoping you could go over this for me. Itachi raised an eyebrow as he read the title of the manuscript Jiraiya dropped in front of him. Lover's Strategies, Book 1, Oasis of Desire. So you're really going through with it, then? Jiraiya grinned. Yup, you know, I kind of got lucky when I died. The last book of the Makeout Tactics series ended on a note that could be considered a proper ending for the saga as a whole. Now that I'm in the afterlife, a fresh new series is just what's needed. And you seem to have gotten a good start on it, said Itachi as he rifled through the pages. This is enough to fill a light novel already. Jiraiya nodded. That's because it is a light novel, or at least it will be. I've got my first draft done, but I wanted to have a third party look it over and help me edit it before publishing. And I'm your go-to option? Asked Itachi. I suppose I should be flattered if one of the legendary Sannin wants me to help him get his new book off the ground, but the romantic comedy genre isn't something I have a whole lot of experience with. You may find me to be a poor editor for something like this. Doesn't matter, said Jiraiya, just look it over and get back to me on it, all right? Itachi nodded. Very well, then, I'll start tonight. Jiraiya smiled. Excellent, I'm looking forward to your input. A few days later. Not bad, said Itachi as he passed the manuscript to Jiraiya. It was the brief break between their Zenjutsu and Hakuda classes, and the two of them were out in the hallway with their fellow students in the advanced track waiting to be called in by the instructor. There was a considerable air of excitement among the students. The teacher had mentioned the day before that there would be a guest observing the class today, and while the instructor hadn't gone into much detail regarding their identity, he had let slip that the observer was an officer in the 13 court guard squads. Itachi's mind had immediately gone to Yoruichi, and even though he had absolutely no proof that she was today's observer, there was a feeling in his gut that he couldn't dismiss out of hand. Whoever it is, I'll still perform to the best of my abilities, he thought, even if it isn't her. Word of a good showing on my part could get back to her. Either way, it can only help my post-graduation placement prospects. You really think so? Asked Jiraiya, dragging Itachi out of his musings. He nodded. Overall it seems good. I just marked a few grammar and spelling errors that I noticed. Like I told you before, though, I may not be the best person for editing a story like this. Jiraiya shook his head and smiled as he put the manuscript away. Don't worry about it. If all goes well, I should have the first copies in print a few weeks from now. Itachi raised an eyebrow. You already have a publisher lined up. Jiraiya grinned. Yup, remember Lieutenant Mashiro from the meet and greet after the exams? Hard to forget, said Itachi. It's not every day that a girl tries to lick me, after all. What about her? You've got a subscription to the Seraite News magazine, right? Asked Jiraiya. Itachi nodded. Yes, and I do remember that Squad 9 publishes it. What's that have to do with your new novel? I sent in a letter to the newspaper office asking if they also handled novel publishing. Jiraiya replied. Turns out they do, although it's not their main source of income. Having both the Squad 9 captain and lieutenant at that little gathering of ours after the exams were over is already paying off. I've got a meeting set up with Mashiro this weekend to pitch my book. Impressive, said Itachi. Your networking skills are quite sharp. Of course, they are, said Jiraiya with a smile. That's an essential intelligence gathering skill, after all, you should know that. Itachi nodded. True enough. Best of luck with the meeting. Thanks, Jiraiya replied. If it all pans out, I might just have you help me with editing the second volume, too. I make no promises, said Itachi. It was at that moment that the instructor called them into the room. Unlike the lecture halls devoted to the more academic aspects of their education, the rooms devoted to their combat training were wide open. There were no desks or chairs, just space for drills and sparring. It didn't take long for Itachi to spot the guest observer, and when she met his gaze she gave him a friendly smile. It was Yoruichi. Next to him, Jiraiya gave him a friendly nudge with his elbow. Someone's happy to see you. Itachi wouldn't give Jiraiya the satisfaction of a response, but that didn't change the fact that the feeling was mutual. It was good to see Yoruichi again. He didn't return her smile, but he did give her a nod of recognition, and that seemed to be enough for her. Their instructor, a man with a receding gray hairline named Akifumi Kato, addressed the class. Students, I'd like you to meet a very special guest. This is Captain Yoruichi Shihoin of Squad 2. She will be observing your drills and sparring matches today. Yoruichi smiled and waved at the students. Good to see you all again. Don't mind me, just go through your class as usual and act like I'm not even here. Right, Itachi mused, I doubt any of us will be able to do that. And she knows it. Now, said Instructor Kato, let's begin our warm-up exercises. The first third or so of the class was relatively uneventful as Itachi, Jiraiya, and the other students followed their teacher through their drills. It was the normal routine. The real excitement would come once Instructor Kato began pairing up students for sparring matches. Given Itachi and Jiraiya's advanced skills, the teacher had long since ceased pairing them up with anyone other than each other. The former Akatsuki member and the legendary Sanin were the only students in the advanced track capable of matching each other in a fight. Itachi could feel Yoruichi's gaze lingering on him as he went through the drills, and when the time came for the sparring matches the excitement in her eyes was palpable. He couldn't blame her. He was actually rather eager to show her just how far his skills in Hakuda had advanced, and he couldn't ask for a better opponent to demonstrate his abilities against than Jiraiya. All right, said the sage with a smirk as the two of them squared off in their little section of the hall. Don't think that I'll go easy on you just because she's watching. I wouldn't dream of it, Itachi replied as he dropped into an opening stance, ready when you are. Jiraiya made the first move, lunging forward with a hard right hook straight out of the gate. Itachi ducked beneath the blow and struck back with a quick left jab, but Jiraiya had already brought his arm up to counter. Itachi had planned for that, though, and was already dropping low to make a sweeping kick. However, Jiraiya was ready for it, and he swiftly backflipped to evade the strike. The move only bought the sage a brief moment of respite, for Itachi surged forward to take the initiative. He pressed hard with a series of swift and surgical punches and kicks, doing all he could to mix up his attacks and keep his opponent off balance. That was much easier said than done. Jiraiya was one of the most formidable hand-to-hand fighters Itachi had ever gone up against, and his years of experience exceeded those of the slayer of the Uchiha clan. It would only be a matter of time before the Sannin was able to counter and regain the initiative, and Itachi was already bracing for it. That moment came a few seconds later when Jiraiya grabbed Itachi's right leg mid-kick. Itachi was able to twist free of the sage's grip and leap backwards to regroup, but it was all the opening Jiraiya needed. Now it was Itachi that was on the defensive, and while he held a slight speed advantage over his opponent that was offset by the power behind Jiraiya's blows and the utter relentlessness of his assault. He was hard-pressed to block and dodge the sage's attacks, and his onyx eyes darted this way and that as he searched for even the tiniest of opportunities to turn things around. A few moments later he found his chance and took it. There was the lightest of gaps between one of Jiraiya's punches and a kick, and Itachi used it to get in a quick jab at the sage's lower torso. Jiraiya was able to twist his body to bleed off most of the force behind the attack, but in doing so he ceded the initiative back to Itachi, who immediately went on the offensive. As the two veteran shinobi went back and forth between attack and defense, Itachi was keenly aware of Yoruichi studying his every move. Unfortunately, there was no way that he could shift his focus towards her even the slightest to gauge her reaction to his technique. The tiniest bit of distraction would be all Jiraiya needed to decisively end the fight. All Itachi could do was keep his gaze firmly on his opponent and fight with every ounce of skill that he could muster. It was as intense as all of his previous sparring matches with the sage had been, but at the same time Itachi could not deny the sense of exhilaration he felt as the fight went on. Here he was, going toe-to-toe with the man who had been one of the third Hokage's greatest students, and holding his own to boot. It was a shame that it was only in the afterlife that an intense yet friendly sparring match like this between the two of them was possible. Yes, friendly. As strange as it might have been to imagine, the dynamics between the legendary Sannin and the bane of the Uchiha clan had shifted somewhat over the few months since their fight with the Hollow. While Itachi knew that Jiraiya was still watching him like a hawk for the slightest hint that he might become a threat to their fellow students and the Soul Society as a whole, that had not stopped him from treating Itachi like a colleague since they had enrolled in the academy. It was an utterly surreal situation, one that Itachi was still trying to wrap his head around. He lost track of time as their sparring match continued, with neither one of them able to land a decisive blow. The two of them almost jumped when they heard their teacher address them. "Itachi, Jiraiya," barked Instructor Kato, "halt." The two of them broke off and took a moment to catch their breath before turning towards their teacher. The rest of their classmates had already ceased their matches and were beginning to form a broad circle. That meant only one thing: the assigned sparring matches were over. Now the free challenge fights would begin. The sparring portion of their Hakuta classes was always broken up into two halves. The first half was the assigned sparring, where Instructor Kato would try to match up students according to their skill levels to make sure that his pupils were facing off against someone that they were on roughly equal footing with. After that came the free challenge fights where, as the name implied, students were free to call out any of their classmates for a match. Aside from the obvious rules behind the free challenge matches such as the prohibition of killing or severely injuring one's opponent, there was a layer of unspoken etiquette and protocol that the students were expected to observe. Winning the free challenge fights was a way to stake out one's position in class and advance their social status, but calling out students that everyone knew were weaker than the challenger was frowned upon. Itachi and Jiraiya had only ever challenged each other, and they had stopped issuing those challenges quite some time ago once Instructor Kato has decided to simply pair them up permanently for the assigned sparring matches. Other students had attempted to ascend the informal hierarchy by challenging either Itachi or Jiraiya, but the two former shinobi had taken down so many challengers since classes had begun that now no one would call them out. The students would only challenge each other, but there was no explicit rule stating that, theoretically, anyone in the hall at the time of the free challenge fights could be called out. For the past few weeks now, Itachi had begun considering whether or not to call out Instructor Kato. At this point, he suspected that he had a decent chance at winning such a fight, and he imagined that Jiraiya felt the same way. However, He had never crossed that line because he did not wish for their teacher to lose the respect of his students. Kato was not just an instructor, after all, he was also a former Soul Reaper, and Itachi did believe in showing a measure of due deference to one who had put in his time on the front lines in the struggle against the Hollows. Nevertheless, the temptation was always there, but today it had been eclipsed by another desire. One that was fueled by the presence of the other veteran Soul Reaper in the room today. Itachi was under no illusions, there wasn't a ghost of a chance that he could win if he made this move. That wasn't the point, however. It wasn't about victory or defeat now, it was about truly understanding how far his skills had grown. And how far he still had to go. As he and Jiraiya joined the circle, he heard the sage chuckle. "Oh, man, you're really going to do it, aren't you? Nice to see that your powers of observation remain sharp," Itachi replied as Instructor Kato stepped into the middle of the circle. "Yes, I am." Jiraiya grinned. "And here I am, without any popcorn. What a shame. This is going to be fun." "All right, students," called Instructor Kato, "you all know the drill. Who will be the first to issue a challenge today?" Before anyone else could make a move, Itachi stepped forward. A collective murmur went through the students of the advanced track, and a few broke out into cold sweats at what Itachi imagined was the thought of going up against him. "You can all rest easy," he thought, "I don't plan on challenging any of you today." He looked past his classmates and made eye contact with the woman who had saved his life just a few months ago. "I challenge Captain Yoruichi." Every student with the exception of Jiraiya gasped. Even Instructor Kato was unable to maintain his composure. The teacher's face paled as he struggled to comprehend what Itachi had just done. Now, Itachi," he said, "no one here doubts your gifts in Hakuda, but this is my decision," Itachi finished firmly for him. Instructor Kato turned to the lady of the hour, as it were. "Captain Shihoin, you don't have to humor him." Yoruichi held up her hand and grinned as she kept her gaze locked with Itachi's. "I don't have to, true. But I want to. Actually, I was hoping this would happen." Instructor Kato's eyes widened in shock and confusion. "What? I don't understand." "Don't worry," Yoruichi replied as she stepped forward, shedding her white haori and revealing that same black sleeveless and backless uniform that she'd worn the night they'd first met. "You don't have to. You do have to step back, however. Otherwise, well, it'd be a shame for you to get in the way and ruin my fun, don't you think?" The teacher had no response for that other than to move back as far as he could. The rest of the students followed until Itachi and Yoruichi had almost the entire hall available for their fight. "Good," he thought as he saw the hungry look in her eyes, "I have a feeling I'm going to need it." "I knew you were a bold one," she said as the two of them squared off. "On the very night we first met, you had the guts to go up against a Hollow unarmed and untrained. I'm glad to see that student life hasn't dulled that side of you." Itachi nodded. "Thank you." Yoruichi smirked. "Save the thanks until after you've shown me what you're really capable of. I intend to enjoy myself here, so you'd better not disappoint me." Itachi dropped into a ready stance, his gaze never leaving Yoruichi's. "I'll give you everything I've got." The grin on Yoruichi's face was downright predatory now. "Good, Kato, we're waiting on you." The teacher jumped before stepping forward and raising his right hand. "Are you ready?" Itachi and Yoruichi nodded, but they didn't spare Instructor Kato so much as a glance, their eyes remained locked on each other. "Very well, then," he said, 3, 2, 1, begin." Yoruichi pounced, and she was on Itachi like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't a full flash step. Yoruichi had no intention of going all out against a student, even one as gifted as Itachi had proven himself to be. Still, the speed of her charge was nothing to be sneezed at, and Itachi was barely able to duck in time to avoid her opening punch. From there she immediately went on the offensive, going after him with a ferocious barrage of jabs, with the occasional kick and knee thrown in for good measure. To his credit, though, Itachi kept his arms up in a guard position, and thus he was able to block the strikes that he couldn't outright evade. Yoruichi wasn't about to let up here, though, she wanted to push him to his absolute limit and then some. And Itachi was up to the challenge. As she pressed her assault, Yoruichi was impressed with how Itachi kept his cool even when under pressure from no less than a captain like herself. That glint of focused intensity never left his eyes, and she could sense him looking for the slightest opening even when under such a withering barrage. Even when assailed by a foe as powerful as her, he remained calm and collected. There wasn't a hint of panic anywhere about him. He held mastery over his emotions, which was no small feat under these particular circumstances. A slight shift in his stance was enough to tell Yoruichi that Itachi was ready to counter, and it came a moment later. As she threw a hard right punch, she saw Itachi bend his left arm ever so slightly to alter the angle of his block. When her blow grazed his arm, he made his move with a swift right jab. Of course, Yoruichi was ready for it and proceeded to catch his fist in the palm of her hand. However, Itachi's response was immediate and fluid. He twisted his body and leapt back before she could get a solid grip on him. She was still able to retake the initiative, but she still marveled at his reaction speed. His reflexes are incredible, she thought as she cut loose with a rapid-fire sequence of punches and kicks. I've never seen a student move as intuitively as he does. And this is just after a few short months of Hakuda training. It wasn't just his speed and instincts that impressed her. His footwork was top-notch, and despite how hard she was pressing him, he wasn't anywhere close to being knocked off balance. Every move, no matter how small, was with purpose. He fought with precision and efficiency, spending only the energy that was needed, no more and no less. He was an absolute natural at Hakuda, and it only made Yoruichi all the more determined to get him into Squad 2 the instant he graduated. His stance shifted again ever so slightly, but this time it wasn't a counter that he had in mind. As Yoruichi made a high kick, Itachi dropped low and rolled to the side. He was back on his feet a second later, but he didn't attack. Instead he backflipped to give himself some breathing room. Yoruichi wondered what he was playing at. He had to know that she could close the distance in the blink of an eye, even without Shunpo. And that was when he became naught but a flicker on the wind before disappearing entirely. Even as her eyes widened in shock, that didn't stop Yoruichi from whirling around and blocking the blow she knew was coming. Sure enough, she caught Itachi's punch, causing him to twist and leap away again, but that didn't lessen her amazement at what had just happened. He'd performed a flawless flash step. I don't believe it, she thought even as she went on the attack again. Even in the advanced track, they should only be just going over the basics of Shunpo in his Ho-Ho class.